the meeting now.
Wonderful.
It looks like we're at 43 participants right now, so we should probably give it a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
All right.
I think it's safe to say at this point we have enough for a quorum.
I think we do. Let me pull something up and then we will do attendance here. We'll talk about everything that we're covering today and we'll be off to the races.
You want to talk about, should we mention before we do roll call, just for everybody, if you do have anything that you want to say, especially if somebody else is talking, to do the little hand raise gesture, and then probably stay on mute until it's your turn to talk.
And what we'll do here is we'll start off with our teams here. Please, when we call your team name, you guys can be off mute for right now. Let's make sure that everyone is here. So first, let's start off with New York Warriors. Are you present?
Here, sorry.
Cool. Gaylord.
Here.
Okay. McGee.
Here.
NEP. Anyone from Northeast Passage?
Billy's supposed to jump on, but if he doesn't, then I can accept vote for a Northeast Passage.
Okay. Pittsburgh present.
Here.
Excellent. And Western New York.
I am here.
Awesome. So we have 6 there. Mid-Atlantic. We've got Carolina.
Yep, we're here.
Cool. Maryland.
We're here.
MedStar.
Here.
Raleigh. One from Raleigh. Okay. Sportable. Anyone from Sportable?
They're
All right.
playing possum.
Brooks is here. Correct. Steve Kenyon. Lakeshore Demolition.
Here.
Excellent. Shepherd.
I think Andrew's having trouble getting on. He just texted me, but
Okay.
we're
Let me
sending
go back to that. Sorry. Oh, there's our Steve Kenny and Billy Buffard. And all right, cool. Just a little behind. So Brooks is here. Shepherd. We'll say Sarah for right now. Warriors and the Generals.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. We've got Akron Rhinos. Is Akron present? Chicago Bears.
Here for Chicago.
Detroit is here. Grand Rapids, are you here?
Yep.
Turnstone, are you here? Wausau CKRI Lightning.
Here.
Excellent. Almost there, folks. Any Dallas team?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay. KC Revolution,
Yep.
Ohio Buckeye Blitz,
And what?
Here.
Oscar Mike Militia.
President accounted for.
Awesome. St. Louis Rugby Club.
Yep, we're here.
All right. Ability 360. Anyone from Ability? Okay. Tier, Texans.
Here.
Las Vegas High Rollers.
Here.
Texas Stampede.
Here.
U of A Wildcats.
Here.
Okay. Boise Bombers.
Here.
High Five Storm.
Here.
And then Portland Pounders.
Here.
Portland, okay. And then Seattle Slam.
Here.
Excellent. I counted 25 off that. Anyone get a different number? Is anyone not hearing their team name so far?
Yeah, Bupad, Wildcats, NEP Wildcats.
We got you. Thanks,
Cool.
man.
Debbie Myers from Raleigh will be joining shortly.
I'm on the call too, Raleigh.
Oh, there you are, Debbie.
Mike, I want to make sure you got Akron down.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Steve Kenny, Brooks Bandits.
We got you.
And Northridge Knights.
I thought did Northridge register?
We're still out here, barely.
Okay.
Yeah, they registered. The one
Okay.
name that you mentioned that didn't register was Turnstone.
Okay. Very cool. So folks, just to cover a little bit about what we're doing today, we do have a bit of material to get through, but just so for your information, we are live streaming on Facebook. We are also recording this meeting, and there will be a transcript for this meeting. So we also have Susie, who is taking down notes, and we'll be able to present those. They'll probably take a little while to get out, but just know that it's coming. All right. Anyone have any issues, any concerns before we start off? let's get her done. All right. Let's start off with reports then.
Well, do we need to review and accept the minutes from 2022 first?
We do, which were sent out yesterday. So everyone should be able to take a look at those and let us know if they approve. Need a motion and then a second.
Motion.
We get a second.
Second.
Okay.
All right, now we can start with elections.
right.
Mike, are you going to be running that through the
I can run the
system?
screen share. Say that again, I'm sorry.
Well, when it comes time, are you going to be running the voting through the
Through Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah. But right now it's just time for reports. So let's get that party started.
On the, Mike, on the agenda, we said the elections were next.
Oh, did we? Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I always remember those at the end. My mistake, folks. Sorry, a little rusty. It's been a year. All right. Let's get this going then.
Yeah, we did, but just to confirm, both those individuals are on this call, right? Because I think we said we were going to give them a moment or two just to say
They
briefly
are.
for the elections.
So let's do that. Let's start off with Deborah.
Do you just want to confirm their position as well? They're running for, Mike?
Running for treasurer.
Deborah, are you on or can you hear us?
Or we can go right to Sarah.
Sure thing. I did see Deborah on before, so maybe she's having tech stuff. But for those of you who don't know me, my name's Sarah Leonard. I've served previously in the league for over the past 10 years, originally with the Capital Punishers, which are now MedStar United, and most recently with the Shepherd Smash, which is probably where most of you know me from as head coach. I took it upon myself to apply for a Low Point team, and you might have seen me there. And now I'm lucky enough to be with NEP as I've transitioned personally back to the Northeast. So definitely spent a lot of time in the league, moving around with coaching opportunity. But at this point, I'm transitioning professionally from being a physical therapist into the world of business. So some of you may know that, pursuing my MBA. So very familiar with, QuickBooks, different software, and what's necessary in terms of serving as treasurer. But just personally, as part of the past 10 years, definitely have seen opportunity to, grow and develop in the league, challenged by some of the board members kindly to pursue a position and, make my voice more heard, more known. So just personally, obviously, would be happy to serve as treasurer, again, possess the skills as far as QuickBooks and accounting. However, more importantly, just personally, my goal has always been to represent the 42 teams in this league. So yes, you've seen me with 3 specifically, but if any of you have talked to me personally, my goal is very much to, continue to serve each individual in the sport and to make sure the sport continues for years to come, specifically for the individuals that it was made for, right? So that's where my passion for, Low Point comes in. Certainly I'm open to questions, but otherwise, I'm happy to serve you guys if you've had me.
Thank you. All right, now, Deborah, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, my internet went down for a sec, but I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So sorry, I just barely got back on. So I get to just talk a little bit by myself.
Yeah.
So I served on, I became involved in rugby back in 2003, just as a friend and a spouse. And then I met my husband and then got involved with the West Coast team for quite a while. I was assistant coach for many years, team manager, team rep, all those things. And then I was on the board, I think from 2012 for quite a while. I don't, it was like 6 years or so. I served with Dave. We both started on the board together. I stepped down from the board just because it became too much when I had kids, but I really missed it. I missed being sort of part of the league. I have, lots of experience on the board. I appreciate all the people I've worked with. I really enjoyed watching the league grow, and not necessarily grow, but just evolve into what it is now. And so much has changed even since I was on the board, in the last 6 years. And I think it's great. And it's something great to be a part of. In terms of experience, I have tons of experience, bookkeeping, nonprofit, for-profit. I've dealt with lots of grants and bookkeeping for grants, things of that sort. So yeah, I just thought it would be nice to be back involved in that level again. And Sid is stepping down. He was a great addition after I left. And, I heard he was stepping down. So I thought, hey, why not get back into it?
Thank you.
Do we have any questions for either of the candidates? Motion to vote?
Motion.
Do I get a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Third.
Once I launch this, only voting members. Bob, should we do a little housekeeping here as to our two other teams?
Yeah, just to make sure who's on or whatever.
Well, we have 26 teams, so we have a quorum. We should be good to go here. Only team reps are able to vote here. If we have more than the right number of votes, we have to reset it and try it again. So let's not do that. All right, here we go. You'll have 1 minute to vote. Ten more seconds. There we go. And our new treasurer, Sarah Leonard. Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks to both candidates for putting in your names. You guys are both great candidates. We look forward to working with you, Sarah.
And just for procedural questions, I know this came up earlier. Sid still remains the treasurer through the end of this meeting, at which time that is transferred over. So for the purposes of this rest of this meeting, he's still functionally the treasurer.
And we're going to miss you, Sid. You've been an amazing addition to the board. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Well, thank you. I look forward to working with Sarah to transition, and I will still be around and see everybody on the court, but it's been a privilege. Thank y'all for allowing me to be a part.
Thank you for the years. that you've put into this.
I'm excited about the future.
Thank you, Sid. We have two other positions that are up for a vote. They are unopposed at this time. That would be Bob Lopez as commissioner, and then Daniel Curtis as second vice president. I guess we can move along.
Here's to another 2.
Okay. Congratulations, guys.
Congrats, Bob. Good to have you.
All right, so I think we're moving on to our reports now.
All right, it looks like we're starting with mine, but I'm not going to read the report because everybody already has it in text form. I just want to say this was a pretty awesome year to watch. You know, if you think about just coming out of COVID, especially, I feel like we dealt as a league with some pretty tough times. And it's not like we had a bunch of funding. We play a contact sport. There were some things that really could have hurt us in our league. I feel like could have been in some serious trouble. But it wasn't just, you know, that we came out of it okay and the league was still there. I think anybody that was at any tournament this year saw that the league actually thrived and the level of play was incredible. The tournaments all were awesome. So I guess I'm just proud of the entire league, but you know, I think a couple things worth mentioning are the job that the safety committee had done throughout all of it over this time to get us back on track. The board and all of the time, energy, and effort to just protect the league and make sure that you know, we're able to operate and function the way that we are. It's been impressive to be a part of it and watch everybody put their heart and soul into this. The refs and classifiers did a great job, especially with trying to come back after basically 2 years of not really being on the court or being able to do what you do. I think that you did a great job, we'll say, playing catch up. And also, you know, I can't imagine, especially like being a referee and having to come back after a bunch of time of not really being actively engaged for a long time, and the amount of pressure that was there too to make right calls all the time. I know that's not an easy job. The racks, the reps, the players, the support staff, and even Dan and Curly with getting this low point league started, you know, and everybody involved in getting that started. I mean, I'm excited to see where that goes. I think as far as, you know, like exposure and where the league is going, I personally was really excited just to see all of these teams and executives from some of the biggest companies on planet Earth really taking an interest this year and even having an active hand at nationals and all being there, flying out for it, and you know, getting an idea of what the future could look like and their involvement in the league and the sport. That was pretty exciting. I think Mike Klanowski and kind of, you know, coming into this executive director position, first time ever, and, you know, tackling all of those challenges and, you know, the steep learning curve for what that's going to take for the league in the future and finding out how tough that really is, and also assisting in helping to make the league and the sport more marketable, and the hurdles that we're going to have ahead of us to do that, but confident that, you know, it's just the future is bright. I don't know if everybody in the league knew this, but this year we also had 53 new players. I think that says a lot about the league and where we're going. That means over 10% of the league this year were new players, which is pretty impressive. And again, I think that our refs and our classifiers kicked butt this year. So all the things that I didn't really mention in my annual report, the one that you can read, but things that I thought were worth noting. And thank you for letting me serve again. That's all I got.
Thanks, Noah. Any questions for Noah? Comments? All right,
I'll move on to first VP.
time to move on.
Hey, folks, I'm Mike Cottingham. Again, you can read my report. I don't want to go into it in substantial depth. Been actively involved in the Safety Committee, which is now our Safety and Health Committee. I think as we go forward, we're definitely looking to take a scalpel approach, not a sledgehammer approach. We do not want to have cumbersome and onerous requirements in any capacity for any team or individual in the league. We're sort of looking at case-by-case recommendations and suggestions. So for example, we've put forward a couple revisions on policies for if you have minors on your teams, expectations for having AEDs at tournament sites, and we're looking at maybe having a more concrete concussion policy. This committee, of course, has come out of our COVID committee. So we are going to be working on that and stabilizing that. Goals for the next year that we're sort of looking at as well. I think it's really important for us to continue to grow in markets we haven't had exposure and experience with, maybe markets that have been dormant for a long time, or teams that have consolidated, maybe seeing if we can help those teams grow. Looking at how we can add to the number of teams. That's going to be a personal goal of mine going forward. As sort of noted previously by Noah, it was really stressful getting through COVID. That was the least joyful committee I've ever had to serve on, but I was so thankful for how much effort and time lots of members from the association really put into that committee, and people were thoughtful and people came at it from different perspectives and brought a lot of value. And last thing I want to say is, everyone on this call are sort of leaders in this league, and you're going to know the people on your teams that are leaders in the league if you don't have time. If you have folks that really care about this and want to think about this national level, think about policies, think about issues on the safety committee, thinking about how we can grow the league, and you're willing to serve on a committee, reach out to me. We'll put you to work. It won't be an outrageous amount of work, but we'll give you something that's meaningful and purposeful. We'll get you involved. And we really appreciate your service and look forward to having you more involved. And I'm looking forward to serving for one more year. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been awesome serving with you too, Mike.
Thank you.
Let's move on to Daniel.
Hey folks, Daniel Curtis, second vice president here in Austin, Texas. Yeah, so historically, second vice president's role is fundraising, with the addition of Mike Kay as our executive director. Some of those responsibilities have shifted a little bit. We did receive a $100,000 2-year grant from the Nielsen Foundation, which is primarily dedicated to grants and clinics. We had about 12 or 13 teams apply just for a direct grant of $5,000. We were able to select 5, and then we had about 9 folks apply for grant help, $10,000. We selected 2. We will be doing the exact same thing next season. Look for that stuff to go out, September. We'll make sure you're communicated to. Outside of that, I'm just gonna kind of summarize new roles for me as we do is kind of, communicating with D2 and D3 teams, kind of like Dr. Cunningham said, trying to get more folks involved, more athletes on the court, finding individuals to kind of step up and represent. I think we have a lot of opportunity moving forward with, after Paris, the sport's gonna come to us, and so we've got a good timetable to really kind of have to sport up a little bit. Oscar Mike hosting nationals past 3 years. We've got big name kind of sponsors that are aware of us, and so I guess I would just, as leaders of your club teams, as folks who have taken the time and interest to be on this call, who've been involved in the sport for so long. You all know how important kind of the grassroots is. And so just to kind of echo what Dr. Cunningham said, if you see an opportunity out there, capitalize, take advantage of it for your club team. If it's something that could help us on a national level, please forward that info to us so we can follow up. looking to continue to grow the sport, get more funding, get more athletes on the court. But that's kind of a wrap for me, unless anybody has any questions.
Daniel, I have a question.
Fire away.
Yeah, so is your role shifted from fundraising now to another possibility?
I mean, I'm still primarily fundraising, but also kind of facilitating the grant funding, facilitating kind of the clinic criteria, and then kind of become the point person for Division II and Division III growth and development.
Cool.
So
yeah.
that's,
So, sorry, did you write the grant for that $100,000?
yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. That's awesome.
Oh, thanks, Coach. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, I think we're a good fit. We've got a lot of cervical SCI. We serve a lot of individuals. One thing that I do at the end of each of these grants is kind of say, hopefully we can, self-fund so we don't have to come back to you in 2 years. But I anticipate if we were to do so, we would probably continue to get funding from the Nielsen Foundation. And for those teams that did receive grants and those folks that received clinic funding, I will be sending up just a follow-up form with some simple kind of, pretty easy demographic, just need numbers, easy data that I can get back to the Nielsen Foundation. They don't ask for a lot, but they do need a little. So any other questions?
Thank you, Daniel.
Pleasure, always.
Mr. Dan Caldwell, you're up.
Well, so thanks everyone for allowing me to be part of the board. I'm kind of the new guy. I kind of got thrust in this position over last summer when Mike took the executive director role. When I jumped in, it was right as we were getting ready to do registration. Hopefully that went smoothly for everyone. I think there were a few hiccups, but I think we got through it pretty good. I've also been, I was very involved with Low Point at the World Games last year. And I've also been working with Curly to launch the Low Point League, which it looks like we're going to be pretty successful with 9 teams in our inaugural season. And so far we have over 65 athletes signed up. And that will be kicking off very soon with the first tournament coming up in a couple of weeks. So I don't really have much else to say other than that, unless anyone has any questions for me. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dan. It's been great having you on board, and I appreciate you stepping up like that. All right, Mr. Sid Christensen. Christian,
you can add the son on there. It's okay. Some people do.
That was my bad.
That's okay. Yeah, as everybody's noted, it was, and I think Noah kicked off the comments of coming through COVID that, we really did have, I think, especially considering we coming out of COVID had a strong year. There's been some developments that, have been really a blessing to the league. And we've mentioned the Low Point, and the financial report is in your records like everybody else. I'm not going to go over it line by line or in detail. I will say that if you look at it, because sometimes you need to digest these reports, and especially the financial report, I'm always available, even during the transition to Sarah's treasurer. I'm always available to answer any questions I can. But I do want to hit some highlights. We did have increased resources this year, as has been noted. The Nielsen Foundation grant, about half of that has been dispersed. Little less than half of that has been dispersed for this year. And as Daniel noted, there's still the other half that's available for the coming year. The board went ahead because we had that year ahead. If you look at the financial report, you'll see we had an increase in interest income due to the fact that interest rates did go up, and the board wanted to put those funds that were not going to be used this year, 50,000 into a CD. It's there, and it will be that CD will be cashed in the coming year. But our interest income, it's not something we can live on, but it's an increase in funding, and I think it's a wise decision on the board's part to put those funds where they can earn a little more interest. But we did have those funds, $100,000. We also had the $150,000 from the Oscar Mike Foundation, which was used to fund the executive director's position, and the Low Point Rugby. Being in the Birmingham area where I live, it was really great to see the Low Point Rugby and to see that being launched, and Coach Curley and Dan and Sarah and all those that worked to make that reality. That is also helping to further our own Low Point season. That's a great development, and I want to thank Oscar Mike Foundation for making that happen, and the funds their generous funding of that. Secondly, in the report, every other thing really, if you look at the financial report, was kind of a standard year other than those developments. Income and expenses. We did have an increase because, as noted, coming out of COVID, the logjam of classifier work, Amy and her team, man, they did a lot of work this year. And with that work comes an increase in expenses. So they had if you look at those numbers are increased. And by the way, when you look at there's like actually 3 different reports in the financial report, because one of the things that the board voted on this year was that we transitioned from a March 31 year end to a May 31 year end. The reason for that is because that helps us, that more closely aligns with our natural accounting cycle. Having a March year end, like for instance, this year, we had our national tournament after our physical year end. It just creates some challenges and makes it a little more difficult for the treasurer in reporting when that's the case. So the board voted to extend change our year end to a May 31 year end. So in your financial reports, what you see is the regular report of a March 31st year ending of 2023. Then there's a short period report that reports April and May that kind of transitions us to the May year end. And then there's the proposed budget that is for the new fiscal year that starts on June 1 and goes through May 31 of 2024. So those are the reports that you see in the treasurer's report for this year. And so that's all took place. Another thing that I wanted to report, if you look in the documents of my report, there's an insurance form. It's a copy of our certificate of insurance. This is the form that we give to, for instance, those of you who host tournaments, or you need a certificate of insurance for your practice facility, whatever. This is the form that we give to those who request it. And just wanted to, the Health and Safety Committee recommended, and I agree that it's helpful for our body to know what those coverages are. You can look at that form. Once again, I won't go into great detail. If you have any questions, you can ask, but it shows the general liability, the auto coverage, the accident, all the different coverages of the insurance that when you pay your team fees, that's the coverage that the insurance is covering. Basically, just to give you a summary, any supervised event or supported event by the USWRA is covered by that policy. So your practices, tournaments, those kind of things, if it's supervised by the league or if it's sponsored by the league, then it's covered by that insurance policy to the extent of the coverage is listed on that certificate. And so that's just a little bit about the insurance. And once again, if you have any questions on that, I'd be glad to answer them. In conclusion, I've already said earlier how much I appreciate. This is my last time to serve in this role at this time. But man, it's been a privilege. I'm very excited. Some of you may not be aware. I got into rugby late. I've been, since I was 19, I've been had a spinal cord injury at 19. So I've been in a chair for 42 years. But I discovered rugby late in life. I was 54 when I first discovered rugby even existed. You may say, how could that happen? And I ask the same question all the time, but I'm just so glad I discovered it. The team, the board, the committee, our commissioner, referees, classifiers, man, it's a privilege to play. It's been an even greater privilege to serve in this capacity. And I'm very excited. The older I get, and the fact that I started late, I still got a little wear and tear on my body, and they keep giving me these discounts that makes it favorable for me to get on the court. So I appreciate, and I'm not trying to influence any voting on any proposal this year, but at 61, I'm very grateful for the deduction I get in playing. It's very helpful, I promise you. But anyway, I love everybody on this call, everybody in this league. And it is a privilege. I look forward to the season coming up. If you have any questions, now's the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Noah, could I ask Sid a question?
Yes.
Sure. Sid, thank you for your service. And man, I really appreciate your age comment. So thank you for everything that you did for the league over the years, and we appreciate this report. I do have a question about the report. Item 44.820. It says fundraising, and it's $6,902. Could you expand upon that, please?
Well, that's just the fundraising that, this year there were several events that our executive director scheduled. As a matter of fact, there's still the golf tournament coming up, but those are the funds that our executive director worked toward raising this year. That's the total that we collected on those endeavors.
Okay, thank you for that. And could you expand upon 65080, the salaries and benefits?
That is also the first, this is the first year, for instance, that we've had a paid position, that being the position of executive director. And that includes the benefits for the executive director, including insurance and some other costs of providing the executive director's position.
And is that for just the year, or I noted the difference between March and now, so that does not include that extra 12,000 that was in that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you again,
comments,
Sid.
Coach. Thank you, Coach.
You got it.
Hey, Sid, I might have missed it, but was there an increase in our insurance cost?
Yes, there was. And one of the things, and everybody knows this just from life in general in the current financial climate in our country. But the insurance rate did go up. I know that there's a proposal this year for changing the way that we structure the annual fees. And that will be very helpful to help us stay in line with the increased costs. And there's a chance that those costs may drop back down, but our insurance broker said there's no way to know that for sure. And there's no way they can obviously promise that, but they did go up as pretty much all costs across the board went up. But you can see it was probably about a 30% increase. It was not a minor increase.
Thanks. Yeah, I know Sid spent a lot of time shopping around for insurance, and a lot of folks just refuse to kind of come near us. So there's not many people out there willing to insure us, right, Sid?
And Daniel, one of the great things that the executive director's work this year got us signed up with Move United, which a opportunity for us to possibly get a better situation as far as costs and coverages through Move United. We haven't really pursued that in depth yet, but it is something we're planning on pursuing to hopefully decrease our costs and even improve our insurance coverage.
Thanks.
Does anybody have anything else? Sid, again, I think, you know, everybody has appreciated you so much and the love and care that you put into this. So thank you. And you're going to be missed at the board meetings.
Well, thank you. I will miss them to some degree.
Second that. Thanks, Sid.
Yes.
All right. Bob, you're on it.
Yes, sir. I just want, thanks again, Sid. I wanted to thank you also personally, but also I wanted to mention, you were talking about deductions based on your age. I just want to clarify, we have no deductions. We have adjustments for additions to how many points on the court. So just to remind everybody, we don't have deductions.
I
But anyway.
apologize for my misterminology.
Anyways, it's just, you know, I tend to be a stickler about that. Anyway, finishing like everyone else, I'm not going to read my report. People can read it, ask me whatever questions. I can't believe it's 2 years since I was elected. It's been very interesting and I've learned a tremendous amount and glad to be part of it. Like other people have mentioned, coming out of COVID, being basically back to 100% this past season has been great. I think for all the teams, the players, and big thank you goes to the COVID task committee, the officials, the classifiers, team reps, sponsors, and of course the players. So we had a really good year. I'm glad, you know, even with the new format nationals, it was, I think, a tremendous year. You know, I got to see, which, you know, being at the Low Point tournament, seeing how that went, and, you know, the results aren't what we wanted, but they worked really hard and they improved each game. The national team had a big year with finishing second at Worlds, which again is not where they wanted, but still a tremendous result. And I had the privilege of being part of the selection committee this past March. Fortunately, it's the non-voting one, so I don't have to take any heat for any decisions. I was just there as a voice to give some opinions, but the people that are on the committee I thought did a tremendous job based on their dedication to make sure they were fair, looking at all the challenges and what they were trying to accomplish. And certainly not an easy job. The players that were at the tryouts made it even more difficult because they worked that hard during it. So I think it's, you know, an excellent team that was selected. I think they'll do well going forward. And I give a lot of credit to the coaches and the staff of the national team. From being there for the selection camp and then being there at the last training camp, seeing the work that they put in, it's a tremendous amount. And I'm glad with any little part that I can do to help them. Looking forward to the Low Point season coming up. And a big thank you to Steve Curley, Dan Caldwell, Sarah Leonard, and Rita for the work they did in organizing it and setting things up. I think it's going to work really well. And looking forward to that and the Nationals this September in Houston. And a couple other side notes. We're all one league and we need to promote our league. That's how we're going to raise more money. So one thing we all have to recognize as team reps or board members, whatever, whenever we do things on social media regarding the league, remember that how it's going to affect the league and trying to sell the league. So just remind your teams going forward. We need to present ourselves well, and that's important. And the last thing I'll talk about is nationals for next year. We're fortunate this year that we had 2 bids. And, you know, we did site visits at each location. The last one was this past Wednesday. We met as a group last night and we're going to finalize decision early next week, then reach out to each of the two potential hosts and then announce it to the league. So that's something that we will announce next week. As with anything else, and as the other board members have said, any questions or anything I can help with, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I try to be available as much as possible. And I try to go to as many of the events during the year as I can, as most of you know. And that's all I have, unless anyone has any questions for me.
Thank you very much, Bob. You've worked your butt off this year. All right, if nobody has,
I do have a question. For the two potential hosts for nationals, do we have like an idea of what weekends those tournaments will be?
Yeah, we have an idea. It'll be towards the end of April, either last or the second to last weekend, depending which location. The unfortunate thing that I just found out yesterday is one of those dates might conflict with a US national event. So once we decide on the host, then we're going to see if what we may need to do to change that. But it would be one of the last 2 weekends in April.
All right, thank you.
all right, there is nothing else. Our first year ED, Mike Klanowski, are you ready?
Ready. So want to thank you all for the honor it has been over this past year to be in this position. It has been a challenging year, a learning year. There's been a lot of relationships that have been built up but have not come into fruition yet. A number of business relationships that I hope will evolve into something where we get a consistent amount of donors and sponsors for our league, greater than what we've had previously. Also, working with different organizations such as Move United to earn our affiliate status. So we are now connected with them so that we will be able to use their resources, not just for insurance, but also for grant writing purposes. Also, we're going to be reaching into areas that we hadn't reached into before. A lot of what my time right now is spent doing is getting local sponsors for our golf outing. And that's involved getting out, hitting the turf, and really chatting up with some folks and seeing what they want to do to invest in our league. And I really hope that our golf outing is incredibly successful. We're picking up golfers, we're picking up sponsors, and really excited about what we're going to be able to do on August 21st. A little bit of the summary of what I was talking about during my report is that we really need to continue working on recruiting referees and classifiers, as well as athletes and coaches. We did have 50 new athletes this year, but we need to make sure that we keep the machinery moving along to get more people into our world. So classification is huge. Really want to support our classifiers. They did an incredible job this year. I want to know what we could do with even more support. Same thing with the referees. Referees did a fantastic job of doing some new ways of running clinics and teaching referees virtually before getting them into tournaments. Really exciting news there too. So those are all areas that we can improve upon. And obviously Daniel talked about the Nielsen grant, which has been years of Daniel's work, making sure that comes into fruition. And he's done a fantastic job with that. Really excited about what good is going to happen for all these teams that receive funding. And our referees and Sportable got some pretty big grants, and really excited to see what they do there. So there's a lot that did not happen this year, but there's a great foundation for what will happen in the next year. And I'm really excited about what we're going to do. So I'm open to any questions or comments.
I have a question.
Sure thing.
Sure. You talk about that you were able to raise upwards of $20,000.
Yes.
Can you expand upon that, please?
Yes, about $7,000 from the Wreck the Hulls. There was a grant from Kelly Brush Foundation, and then from our auction and everything like that.
Okay, and from that, and I thank you for that. And looking at this, in transparency, I applied for the same position you did, and I didn't get it. Congratulations to you. Part of what I understood the position to be, your job was going to be to do fundraising, correct?
Correct.
That was your main goal in this.
Correct.
Yeah. What would you say that is the biggest thing that you learned? Because in your first address to us, you said you felt like what you didn't know you would be able to know. What do you feel like you've learned that you didn't know?
Sure. I think that relationships take longer to establish than I expected. I also know that grants are not pieces of candy that are just laying on the street. They take a lot of work, as we've seen the evolution of the Nielsen grants with what Daniel has done.
Right. So do you feel like that, do you still hold your position that you held previous to this, or is this just your job now?
This is my job right now.
Yeah. And so I'm just kind of putting this all together is that you get paid $80,000 if I'm reading the numbers right, and we raised upwards of $20,000 in our first year. Is
Yes.
that right?
Correct.
And then if I'm looking at the projection for next year, the goal is to raise $40,000. Correct?
Anything above where we're at right now would be a benefit.
May I interject?
Please.
Coach, if you look at that 40,000, there's like 3 different categories. Some of that is just plain fundraising that's undesignated. Some of that's in grants. The total projected for the executive director to bring in is basically what will cover his salary. So if you look at the different categories, the projected and the goal is about 100,000.
So okay, thank you for that, Sid. I appreciate that. So, and I'm just curious, what is it that you feel like you're going to be able to do this next year that you didn't do this year to make up a gap of $80,000?
I think it really comes down to the relationships with companies like NSM, New Motion, other companies like Permobile Foundation have been supportive of us. And a lot of these companies have not been willing to give money right off the bat, but they are kind of like in a holding pattern with their finances just because of economic factors. And these are folks that I've known, I've worked with, and I believe they're shooting me straight that they're not given as much as they have previously. And that's just made things a little bit trickier this year.
Okay, and yeah, and Noah, I ask you this, and I say this to Noah. Noah, thank you for the donation from Oscar Mike. Man, it's incredible. I wish we all had that person in our life that could help us with that. What is the review that we have for this position, and I'm talking just overview. What do we have for as a review in place that we can look at and look at performance, because performance matters? That's a Noah question.
Yeah, I agree with you that performance matters. The board has been working at having regular reports and reviews from Mike, and has been a part of learning and seeing all of the grants that he has applied for. And, you know, I feel like I was very hopeful for what could happen in year number one, but still, I think while I was giving the, maybe excited, hopeful side of things, I also, in the back of my mind, realized what kind of task that is. I'm sure you know too, because you've been fundraising for a long time. I think, on average, it takes about 18 months for a new partner to actually cut a check. And there's a lot of hand holding and, like things that have to begin in the beginning. And I think, like just being able to be somebody to watch what has transpired over the last year. It is a little frustrating that a lot of those relationships didn't cut checks yet this year, but I think, I had to start somewhere. And, personally, I think, especially because I was a part of the process with, finding the funds to do this, I would have really liked to have seen us hit what we'll call a minimum for keeping the position going. But, I'm also not going to, pretend like that was an easy task or, it's almost like you had to coach along the way, right? Like you expect higher, but that sometimes it's not possible. So I think, it was a delicate balance there, but I am proud, I guess, of seeing the traction. I just wish that there would have been more checks cut right out of the gate. But I firsthand, just like you, know how hard that is to cultivate relationships that quickly, especially when a lot of them, especially the ones that we don't have longstanding ties with, we're being approached for the very first time.
Yeah. So I guess my last question is, would Oscar Mike consider doing this year 3 if the performance is what we're looking at right now?
I think that, over the last couple of years, and I think that I have complete permission to speak on behalf of Oscar Mike, but I personally would love to be able to support the league however I can. It is going to be difficult moving forward. I don't know how much support we'll be able to give. Last year was probably, maybe not the most ever, but I definitely think that was more than we will regularly be able to give. There were some special circumstances there, but even if it's not a ton financially that we're able to give, I still want to, I think the things that people don't get to see are all of our partners. We have opened the door to the league and have really hoped that and brought Mike into meetings and even passed off a lot of our connections in hopes that they start to support the league. So, like I said, even if it's not financially, I hope that we're able to continue to grow relationships for the league.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think next we had Justin from Tampa.
Yep. Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, obviously, the return on investment wasn't what we hoped, and but I mean, honestly, is the money raised? I mean, obviously, some of it, obviously, from the auction is money that we typically get every year. So, I mean, the 20,000 number is really a smaller number when you look at it like that. I mean, with what we've been raising, is that something that adding a voluntary board position couldn't have taken on and accomplished the same thing and invest that money differently rather than doing an ED position? And my only other thought was, I mean, I heard some of the companies that we're trying to cultivate relationships with, they're all DME, companies that we've gone to year and year again. Like I thought the idea when hiring the position was somebody that had connections in some of the the areas that we're already not affiliated with to try to expand our reach. I just think going back to the well with wheelchair companies, with manufacturers, there's only so much you're going to get out of them, and not really see the growth that I think we're looking at as a league. So that's my comment.
Can I say something first, Mike, in response to this? Just to go back in time a little bit, I'd like to, I guess, point out why the league wanted to have an executive director. It's something that, and a lot of people that have been around in the league for a very long time, a lot longer than myself, have been talking about needing an executive director position. It's kind of been a dream of the league for a long time to have somebody focused full time on it. Before Mike became the executive director, I feel like everybody on the board wished that we had more time from him than we did, because he was doing so many things that it became exciting to imagine what it would be like if you had somebody full-time working on all of the league issues. And then there was a bit of a curveball thrown right during the hiring process, or right before it, where a lot of it had to be focused on fundraising. And the reason that we went down that path was because we knew that in order to sustain the league, but the position had to come first. So fundraising became almost priority number one as we put out the offer letters, or the position letters. So it is I feel like it's tough. I don't want to beat up Mike too much on this call or anything. We all know that we wish there was a larger return on investment, but a lot of the companies that he has been talking to also are not just wheelchair companies. I know, because I've been in a lot of the meetings, or at least shepherd the handshakes and stuff like that to a lot of them. And there is a lot of positive traction. I just don't know when and where we'll see the dividends on it. But it's also something that I feel like I wouldn't really want to give up on if possible. And I don't know if I'm speaking for the entire board of the league on that, but I do feel like it would be helpful to maintain this position in the future, especially when it's not solely focused on fundraising, but back to what we were all hoping for a few decades.
Next up, we have U of M wheelchair rugby.
I guess I was just going to ask, as far as responsibilities for the ED this year, they've been diminished other than fundraising. What's the intention for the expansion of those duties? Like what are the other things that we're hoping that this role will accomplish?
I think a lot of those things are things I built a foundation for as secretary, making sure that we do have a much more visible league, that we're something that draws in views that people want to attend to, that we're establishing relationships, yes, fundraising, yes, but that the league as a whole runs better with a full-time employee running those things.
Thanks.
Sarah Leonard.
I was on mute, so my bad. I was just gonna say, working for a manufacturer just specifically, and one that is a full-time sponsor of things like the NWBA and some international events. I think, we can look at this further now as a board. I'm excited to join. But obviously, one of the first things they look at is our balance sheet and, how viable are we as an organization before they make some of those decisions. So of course, I want to bring as much influence from my company as possible. I would love for them to sponsor the league, and they know that. But I think just being a little bit more creative potentially of how we can maybe elongate the life of the position, because it does look like, going forward, we might not have the funds to pull right from our budget to supplement.
Thank you, Sarah.
Steve Curley.
And Mike, first, I want to thank you for taking on this huge responsibility. My thought is, you know, I think Justin mentioned a voluntary position. I like the idea of formalizing the position with a salary. However, my only thought with the salary is, you know, I'm head of sales, and so with all of our sales team, I'm just kind of going to use this as a reference, I guess. It's incentivized based on production, right? So my just comment would be, if as a board, as a league, has there been any consideration to, you know, lower the base and then maybe you know, funds raised, have a percentage of those funds raised go toward like a, you know, a commission or something added to the salary of the executive director. That's just my thought. I just wanted to throw that out there. Get your position or anyone's feedback on that.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, so many really important comments, so many really good and really fair comments, and things we're discussing internally. I will tell you that some things that we're discussing are a process for annual review, assessing where we're at with this position, assessing what this position looks like, assessing where that goes. I'm probably not giving any sweeping answers today, but we're appreciating, and I'm taking notes for all the suggestions that people are making on this call. And I think that these are really important discussions that we're all having. So thank you all for bringing these discussions forward and having difficult discussions on this. It's a great option, Steve, right? There's a lot of options. I think that clearly the math doesn't look good right now, right? So we'll have to talk about that and what that looks like. So we're probably not able to give you perfect answers, but I think this is the right time to give us suggestions so we can take down notes and as we go back to look at this position. Is that fair for the board?
Yes, thank you.
And if you guys don't mind, we've talked about this for many years. And one of the discussions has always been whether or not to consider paying someone based on their productivity in this situation. And the research that we did 4 or 5 years ago indicated that it was not maybe the best ethical choice for a nonprofit to have a fundraising employee that would, you know, potentially make who knows how much money, depending on how much money they bring in. And I think we as a board decided that wasn't something we were going to do. Obviously, that I don't think it should be off the table. We want to consider any viable option that makes the league better and makes this whole thing run. So I just wanted to make that point because it's not a new conversation.
And just to follow up on that, it's both. Go ahead. Did you not finish? I'm sorry. I think you finished. The answer it was just sort of both yes and no, right? Like if you look at the ethics of fundraising industries, you can have these sort of, they actually think it's unethical to take like a percentage per amount of money brought in, but they're okay with sort of like goals. If you hit a goal number, you get X amount. If you hit a goal number, you get X amount. That's what the industry is set as a ethical expectation. Just to answer Dave's question.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any hands up anymore. If we are ready to move on, I think it's time for the referees report. Marianne, are you on?
I am here.
All right.
Good evening, everybody. Marianne Duda here, representing the referees. Again, my report is sent with the package, so you can read all the juicy details there. It's not extremely long, so I encourage you to check it out. We officiated 1,150 games this year, up from 795 games last year. And of course, last year we're still recovering from COVID. So I'd say that's a great improvement. As Mike mentioned, we are hosting online clinics now for our classroom portion to make it more financially viable for potential candidates. In the past, they had to pay for their own travel, their own lodging at a 3-day tournament. and not get reimbursed for that unless they were, not even if they were certified, because they usually didn't get certified to the end. So this has become much more viable. So we've hosted 2. We're currently in the process of hosting our 3rd. We have 6 new officials this year. We had a couple retire this year, so it's great to add some new blood, and we continue to move forward with that. Having the low point season gives potential officials or newly classroom officials and newly certified officials more opportunities to officiate. And speaking of that, we are staffing those low point tournaments and are aware of the nationals coming up in September. And also, as Mike mentioned, we received a grant from the USWRA, which we are immensely grateful for. We are putting that to use as we speak. We've trained some new evaluators and hope to have more evaluators at tournaments besides postseason tournaments. And as everyone knows, officials improve, play improves, everybody's happy. And of course, our goal is to make everybody happy. And again, we can't thank the league enough for voting on that and giving us this opportunity. We do not take this duty lightly and putting it to good use as we speak. So we have a new secretary coming up as well. Chris Moreno from the Houston area will be our secretary, and he's transitioning into the position now. So please, if you see him, welcome him, congratulate him, and thank Jonathan Williams for his service over the past 3 years. So any questions open or anything from the report you didn't understand?
Hi, Mary Ann, it's Coach.
Hey, Coach.
Got a question for you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you always to our referees who get all the calls right. The question for you is in your report you talk about you've been a member of the USWRA. Is that the league executive board?
Yes, I am on the monthly executive calls as representative of the referees.
And so was that an appointed position?
We have always had representative on the board as far as I can remember.
Yeah, because I mean, in the executive committee in our constitution and bylaws, that's an elected position. And I'm just wondering in your language, I get it that you sat on board calls forever. I get that part. But I was just trying to understand the executive board, which is kind of different of the board itself.
Maybe the better term is leadership committee. I apologize if I got that term wrong.
No. I was just trying to understand if there was a new committee that had been formed. Thank you for that.
No problem. Anything else for me? Thanks, we appreciate it. We look forward to low point season. Hope there's great success there and getting more games, more officials, more tournaments for the 23-24 season.
Thank you. Amy, I think it's your turn.
Sounds good. I will start out by saying we're still progressing with the international compliance. We did get international to agree at the beginning of our season to allow another athlete retirement period. International is still working on getting the MAL system, which is the registration system, and then converting the master list to only registered athletes. So hopefully in the future, that will not be an issue. If that is not done by the fall and there's international athletes that would like to retire, please let me know this summer and we can go back and see if we can do yet another retirement period if their new master list isn't up with reflective active, only active international athletes on it. We are continuing to work with USA on trying to, I know Jen had worked with me a lot on writing into their proposal of getting some international panels in the United States, hosting a tournament that would meet the international compliance at least every other year. So we can get some of our international athletes seen because it is oftentimes a longer space. In addition, it would also allow some of our classifiers to get trained as international classifiers as well. I think the last one was held in May of 2019 when there was a vet at Lakeshore. Just want to comment on communication with teams this year. It seemed much better. We pulled everything we did from the registration system. So I really like our registration system. I would encourage teams next year to continue to have accurate registrations. And if you're making somebody your team rep, please make sure they're going to be responsive because that is who we go to reach out to the teams. And if it is not going to be the person listed as the team rep, please let me know who it is, because the sooner we can get in touch with teams, the sooner we can get you guys schedules and accurate master list out. A couple things have been mentioned that we'll address. We did get to see 117 athletes this year. The breakdowns and new reports of what we did at each tournament, the number of protests, new athletes, athletes under review. When we did put through the master list, not only the new athletes have been mentioned, but another thing I'm excited about is we had a lot of athletes coming back. There were athletes that I pulled that the last time they were seen was 1999 and 2000. So they were really due to be seen this year. The other thing is if we continue to get athletes back that haven't been seen for years, when you guys register, we're going to continue to go through the registration and look when people were last seen. So if someone hasn't been seen since we put in the trunk rule or the new hand rule, and that was in, 2007 on, if they haven't been, last time they were seen was like 1996, we will pull them if they need to be seen under the new rules that have been adopted. We talked about increased costs for classification this year. That is true. After the summer was over and we submitted our initial budget to the board, we went back, as did the referees, and talk about the increase in flights. So I think if anybody's looked at flights, the flights are certainly a lot more expensive. So the board had decided on a number. We did our budget with that, and we actually came in under it. We are trying to keep cost in consideration and get the panels you guys need with the proper level people without having an expense of flying everyone across the country all the time. And we'll continue to think about that for next season as well. Our big project, I want to thank the board for finding the money to help us do it, was on the database. Over the last couple of years, you guys have heard us say, let me go back and look at the old database. Let me go back and look at the old database. I want to give Cindy Ellis a huge shout out because she continued to work on seeing what we could do for a database. We went to international, especially as we're converting to international. They were having the same problem we were, that most of our databases were created in the early 1990s. When these were set up, a platform was not made, which is why the database is unstable. So Cindy found something that specialized in access and understood all of our problems. So we have got them on board, and they're going to go ahead and work on putting all the records from the 90s on back into the database. And from then on, we'll be putting all the stuff into this new database. It is HIPAA compliant, and it is also a stable platform, so we won't continuously lose data and have to search for you guys. So that will help us get you a master list sooner and keep more accurate records. It'll also allow us to pull more data because we'll have all the data in there and we won't be losing folks. So we're working on that this summer. We stayed active on COVID, safety, and certainly are helping with the concussion and injury folks. The other thing we did in December is we really started working with international. They held a education session and they invited us to come. We're going to continue to do workshops with international with the hope of increasing reliability and validity. The other thing that has come out of this is how many athletes we see in a year and how many athletes we see to maintain our certification versus international just doesn't have those opportunities. So international has asked us, we build if they can start sending some of their classifiers that are younger to get experience here. So we're going to build a forum for that. So hopefully we can get more of that reliability and validity across the board for you guys, both nationally and internationally. We had universities reach out to us, which is exciting to get more classifiers trained. We have University of Rhode Island, potentially another university on the East Coast, and then Bradley Bow helped us get connected with some universities out west in Las Vegas, and they are really interested in putting back into PTO and OT programs at least, a mention of what wheelchair rugby is, opportunities. We did have a student, some of you guys saw her at nationals, she was from Texas and did her capstone project on classification. So we really want to get that younger generation back involved. I know Mike had mentioned wanting to support classification. We all met a lot this year. I'm happy to say we had a lot of classifiers active again this year, and that's on you guys' report too. We had a couple things happen when we look back and try to look at the future for us. Certainly in September of 2019, Phyllis passed away, which left a huge hole, and I stepped in. We were trying to get our feet on the ground, and then that little thing called COVID happened. And at the same time in that period, we got told we were non-compliant, and if we did not become compliant, we wouldn't be able to participate in international competitions. So I want to thank the league. I want to thank the board for helping us rebuild and become compliant. We're still in an ongoing process. And with that, we are now at a point where we're starting to rebuild our classification system. So what you'll see come up hopefully before next season is there will be a head of classification, associate head of classification. We will get our RACs back in line so you guys will have access to more people instead of just myself as head of classification, so we can get you quicker answers. We're looking at our education system. We're going to keep our policy and procedure person, which will help make us compliant and make sure we remain compliant with the league and the international league. with our education system, I know many people have asked about this. People do need to be an OT, PT, or MD. They do have to have their license to become a classifier. They can't, the student really takes students, let them observe, but they actually have to have their licenses before we can have them become classifiers. We have done what international has done, which is if someone has practiced for years and maintained their eligibility as a classifier, they cannot have to have their license anymore. But if they become ineligible because they didn't meet the requirements of seeing minimum tournaments or athletes, they cannot come back in without a license. So a good example of this for, I think most of the league knows Ann Hart. This is something that would affect her because she has retired from practice and didn't want to spend thousands of dollars to renew her license in Arizona. But since she still has maintained everything, she can classify with us until she no longer meets minimum tournament requirements. We are looking at doing something similar to the referees to make training easier as we redevelop our education system, which is doing some interviews with people that want to do classification first and then doing those online courses so they really know what they're coming in for. When I pulled the numbers that Phyllis had put together and we did more numbers, we trained about 70 people that never came back in the last couple of years because they thought they wanted to be a classifier, saw it was a sun up to sundown position, then disappeared. So we're spinning our wheels. We're also going to put in competency levels for our classifiers so that similar to what the referees do with their casebook studies, so that we make sure we have competencies among ourselves and we get more equal reliability and validity for you guys across the board. Before next season, we will hold a town hall. I know the mention was that the league is going to change some minor policies. In speaking with some lawyers that specialize in sports, our minor policy will be even stricter than that because of what we do. I want to make sure the whole league knows what it is, and we will certainly talk to teams ahead of time if their minors are due, so all the paperwork can get filled out. We're going to continue to work on this off season with international goals, and we'll let you know what the changes are for that before the season starts. The other question I've got a lot of this year was what about Low Point if we'll classify through Low Point? We are not going to have classifiers at Low Point tournaments this year. But I think it would be a nice opportunity to continue to play catch up from COVID in the future. So we will reassess that with where we are classified number wise, and if we have enough folks to do and work through the summer with you guys on Low Point. That's it.
Thank you, Amy. Does anybody have any questions for her? All right, let's move on to USA Lakeshore. Jen or Megan?
Thanks, Noah. I'm going to start and hand it over to Megan. So first, want to thank the league for an incredible partnership that just continues to grow. It's instrumental in the success of the national team that we have a good relationship with the league, and we're grateful for the opportunity to be in that position. So thank you. You know, our report, as others have said, we won't read through it, but I think you'll note in there that we tried really hard to kind of enumerate the accomplishments of the national team, but also to offer thanks because so many people on this call and that aren't on this call have worked tirelessly to lift up the sport, which we have the opportunity to see on the international level. As a Birmingham resident, I have to echo Sid's comments about Low Point. We have been thrilled to see not only the advent of Low Point in the World Games, which Birmingham was so proud to host, but we've been thrilled to see that it's helped elevate the conversation around the sport of wheelchair rugby in our community. And so we're grateful to the staff and the athletes who worked tirelessly to make that happen. We've begun joking that Bob Lopez might consider himself a Birmingham resident soon because he worked so hard for about 2 years before the World Games to help put that competition on, and spends a ton of time just making our sport better. And so we're grateful for that. I'll yield my time to Megan Rowe. She is our new high performance manager, and I'm very, very grateful for her time and hard work to make our sport successful.
Thank you, Jen. I think I know a lot of you on this call. My name is Megan Rowe. I'm the new HPM for USWRA. I came on in the middle of last year. And so just a couple highlights from the report that we sent in. We started the year off with the America's Championships in Colombia. The team took gold and punched their ticket to Worlds in Denmark. Shortly after that, I think all of you remember, we tried to go to Canada Cup. But a small thing called COVID kind of jumped in the way of that. And we made a difficult decision after consulting with Team USA doctors and USAWR medical staff to withdraw from Canada Cup. It was really, really hard, and we stand by that decision. We think it was the safe decision to make, even if it was a huge bummer. We shortly after that hosted Tri-Nations at Lakeshore, where we invited the Great Britain national team and the Canadian national team. USA finished on top of that group as well. And then following that in Worlds, I think mentioned already, we finished second. And so mixing all of that together, we ended the season at the top of the WWR rankings, which was a really proud accomplishment for this crew. Kind of mixed in along the year, we held a number of training camps, 2 of which were development camps. This year, we opened up an application process with help from the league and pushing that out through all of their social channels, all of our social channels. And we saw over 40 athletes apply to be a part of that. And so we were really excited for those opportunities. We held one training camp, and then we held one in collaboration with the Great Britain development program. And that was really neat. We saw a week of great competition and a unique opportunity that I think we're going to try and continue into the next quad, which we're really excited about. Looking into this season, we selected the 2023 team in March. That team will travel to Paris for Wheelchair Rugby World Cup, and then Santiago, Chile for the Pan American Games at the end of the year as well. So you'll see those happening kind of around October, November. And then kind of mixed in with that, we had received a grant from the USOPC for coaching education. And again, opened an application process and pushed it out through the league. We got just shy of 20 applicants, which we were really excited about. Made it a hard choice to kind of choose and select a pool of coaches to attend some of our camps. And so we did that. We are excited. We had our first 2 join us in May, and the rest will join during pieces of our long September camp. So looking forward to that new piece. And along with that grant, we're going to create an online portion. More info coming soon on that one. And then a piece in our training camp that I wanted to send a huge thank you to was to Marianne and the Refs Association. We have tried to bring in some refs from the league to our training camps. And that's been a tremendous success on our end, and hopefully on the other end as well with the refs. We have learned a whole lot. It's helpful to have knowledgeable refs on the court with our team as we train. And then in some of our friendly competitions that we have collaborated with. So like so far in May, we've invited the Colombian national team to attend our training camp. We trained alongside each other and then had some friendlies. And then going forward this month, we're inviting the Canadian national team in for a similar thing. And so thank you to the refs. We appreciate you guys. We couldn't do it without you. And hopefully it has provided an opportunity for some learning and growth on the other side as well. And then again, like we've all talked about already, thank you to Amy Bond and the classifiers. Keeping us consistent with WWR classification is a huge undertaking, and we really, really, really appreciate all the work going into that space too. And then finally, we in the report have listed dates in the process for the selection of the December for the 2024 team. So those applications are going to open on October 15th, and that deadline is going to be October 25th. And there's a series of dates following that as far as when invitations are going out, when they need to be accepted, and then when the final list is posted. All of that you can find on our website and our selection procedures. It's in this report, and if anyone has any questions, please reach out, and I am here and would happily talk through any of it.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Jen. Does anybody have any questions for them before we move on?
I do. Noah, could I ask Megan a question?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Hey, Megan, congratulations on your position. I know you're going to do awesome with it. Just a question: are all of your staff still interim, or any of them had that title taken away, or not taken away, removed from that?
I can speak to my position. It is no longer an interim position, but I will let Jen, as her position, answer the rest.
Okay.
Sure. Hey, yes, we've removed the interim title from the staff that we have. So we have our head coach, assistant coach, and then we have a number of different performance staff.
Was there an application process for the coaching positions at all, or any of the staff positions?
There was not.
Is there a reason why?
We just implemented the process we thought was best for the program, but always happy to continue to look at best ways to do things.
So if I understand correctly, the head coach and the assistant coach are both positions now with the league, or with the team.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody else? All right, thank you guys. I think it's time to move on to the committees. Bob, do you want to start off with the Hall of Fame?
Sure. I mean, each year we go through a process where anyone can nominate people for the Hall of Fame. This past fall, 3 people were nominated, 1 player and 2 coaches. To be elected into the Hall of Fame, it's the Hall of Fame members vote, and anyone that's nominated has to get a 75% number. So 2 out of the 3 people that were nominated achieved that number. So they were elected into the Hall of Fame. You know, we have a couple people that have been elected but haven't been inducted because they haven't been able to come to nationals. This past year, we only had 1 member able to come, and that was Coach Gumbert, and he was inducted, as you all know. Appreciate the work that Oscar Mike did in having the banquet to honor him, and the league in recognizing, you know, the players and the people that voted for him for electing him in, and the other people in. Certainly we want more players in. So if you have any questions or you want to nominate someone, please let me know. The other thing, in the time that I've been in Lakeshore recently, which is rarely, as Jen mentioned, we talked about at Lakeshore, there's a wall that has the Hall of Fame members listed. And there's some pictures and all that. Well, it still has the old logo of USWRA. So we want to update it to the current logo and also expand it because the number of people that are in the hall is growing. So I appreciate the collaboration with Lakeshore and Jen so we can get that done. We're figuring out how to best do that, but that's what we're working on. And as always, any questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Bob. Let's move on to the competition committee. Steve.
Yes, thank you, Noah. Steve Kenny, Chairman of the Competition Committee. Just a quick overview. The main responsibilities of the committee is for monthly team rankings during the season, and then postseason seeding, both semifinals and nationals. The committee is made up of myself, Bob the Commissioner, our 7 racks, and then each year we add 3 at-large members each year. This year's members were referee Dan Plax, Gwen Debley, and Eric Newby. I would like to thank those 3 for their contributions and input through this season. And we'll be looking for 3 new members to join the committee this upcoming season. So please share that with your teams and anyone involved in the league. It could be, like I said, referees, team managers, classifiers, and anyone interested. Please keep an eye out. Bob, as our commissioner, opens up submissions to be part of our committee, usually September, October, before the season gets going. It's a great opportunity for someone who wants to know how the process works firsthand and be involved. And it doesn't take that much time. This year, probably our biggest challenge as a committee was ranking teams that don't play very often or play very different opponents. So that's something that I would like to encourage all teams to do. The more that you play and the more different opponents that you play makes it much easier for the committee to be accurate with their rankings. And the other challenge would probably just be inconsistent rosters when teams do play other teams. There's sometimes guest players, they're missing top players. So that does make it different, but difficult. However, this year with the new nationals format, I thought everything in semifinals and nationals was very competitive. As an example of that would be both Division I and Division III both had three-way ties to get into the championship game. So that's showing the parity and competitiveness of our league. So I thought that went well, and our seedings and the final results were pretty close. So we continue to do our best. It's still a subjective process with voting, but I encourage anybody who has any questions or would like to get involved, please contact me or Bob, and we would be glad to have you. Any questions?
Thank you, Steve.
Great, thanks.
All right. Is anybody in favor of taking a 5-minute break before we get into proposals, or do you want to move this right along?
Let's keep it going.
All right. Well, then it is that time. Dr. Cottingham is going to assist in making sure we move through these efficiently and keep this productive. So I guess Mike or Dr. Cottingham, do you want to kick this off or maybe give an expectations of how this process can go?
Yeah, so the way that I'm going to approach this is that I'll briefly outline the proposal. Hopefully you've all read the proposals and know what you're voting on. I'll briefly state what the proposal does. I'll briefly state what the positive and negatives that were sort of fairly obvious and transparent, just to save us some time, of each proposal, as most have some benefits and limitations. And then we'll open up to discussion. We'd like to keep that discussion efficient, so please keep it concise. At that time, of course, if the individual who sponsored that proposal wants to make a statement about it additionally, or at least respond to any questions, that's probably the appropriate time to do that. Does anyone have any concerns with that? Again, I've nominated none of these, so none of them do I have any dog in these fights here. The first one is a proposal to change language related to the annual fees in the amendment bylaws put forward by the commissioner. The language proposal change would be to remove the statement that that there is a specifically noting what the dues and expenses would be for membership, and instead allowing the board to make that decision and then modify that number, not increasing it by more than $100 in any given year. The rationale on the positive side of this would be that it allows for a more streamlined AGM annually. It allows for a process to allow the board some discretion since they're sort of dealing with those budgets on an yearly basis. And the limitation to this is it would take the ability to limit the increase in fees out of the hand of the board unless an additional modification or amendment was made. At this time, are there anyone who'd like to make any discussions or comments on this proposal, proposal A? I don't see any hands up. Does anyone else? Do I have a motion to vote?
Motion to vote.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's run it.
You guys will have 1 minute to vote. As we're moving along, if that's too much time, we will shorten that up, but to start off, 60 seconds to vote.
Friendly reminder, if you're not a voting member, do not vote. Only team reps. There's a hand that's currently up. I guess we'll address that after this vote.
10 seconds. And voting is closed. Proposal passes.
There is a hand up from the 801. Area code. It looks like you're in a phone. You'll have to come off mute if you'd like to speak.
How are we voting? This is Levi Bohan for the Ability 360. How are we voting via phone, or do I have to be on the link?
It didn't show up on your screen.
I'm on my phone.
He called in.
Yeah. I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry. Do you have a way of getting online?
Yeah, I'll get online. Thank you.
Yep.
Proposal B, deadline fees. The purpose of this particular proposal is to potentially increase the fine for teams who do not register in a timely fashion. And then again, this will be set by the board rather than being set by membership at $100. Specifically, the benefit to this potentially is to incentivize teams to register in a timely fashion. With it only being a $100 fee, we have quite a few teams that register late, which causes some administrative headaches for those on the board. The downside to this would again be a greater financial burden for teams that register late, especially for teams that may have not as much organization or structure or stability. The financial penalty may be more impactful. Is there any discussion that would like to be had on this matter? Please put your hand up and we will allow so. Seeing no hands up, do I have a motion to vote?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
I had my hand up. I apologize.
I apologize. Please, by all means, for some reason I didn't see it. Please go ahead.
Sorry, this is Brad Peterson with the Chicago team. We had a meeting about this and just about all the proposals. And the one thing my players brought up was they were in support of it, but had questions about the language, I believe, in that there's no specific amounts. The fact that it's set by the board without any transparency, they would like some sort of limitation or transparency on the monetary amount.
Would the sponsor of this bill like to speak to this and or make a friendly amendment with a maximum amount of modification?
Well, I mean, to me, the transparency is that we announced it at the AGM. The idea is not to make huge changes to the amounts, just that to give the flexibility to the board. We could add that the maximum will go up at any point in time is again similar to the previous one of $100, but I don't know that this is a fee doesn't affect most teams, and they have complete control whether or not they're going to end up having to pay it by registering timely. So,
just to confirm, Bob, are you recommending are you recommending a friendly amendment or not? Just for the record.
Okay, I'll put a friendly amendment that we limit that to $100 increase also.
Okay, there is a recommendation that this is a maximum increase of $100 per year as a friendly amendment. Any opposition to that? Sid, your hand is up.
Yes, I was going to say, one of the things that even adding the limitation of the dollar amount, really voting to put the board in, and I'm leaving the board, so this doesn't benefit me, but it really gives the board freedom and flexibility and does not handicap the board. Whereas even when you put a dollar limit on the amount it can be raised, it just frustrates the process. Trust the board, give the board the freedom to set those amounts. And then if the board abuses that authority, then correct that is really the most efficient way and the best way to handle it, in my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just speaking for my players and the points that they brought up. I think their biggest point was not necessarily the monetary amount itself, is that there's a potential for lack of consistency between teams just because it's all kind of behind closed doors.
Well, the other thing, no, I'm sorry, let me just mention something. You know, these will be set by the board each month. The minutes of the board are posted to the website, so it's transparent to the league what we talk about and what we decide. So it's not like I don't think that it's really that. I think there is some transparency.
And there's not a variation in the fees per team. It's if you violated the policy, then the same fee is paid by all teams. So.
University of Michigan, Dave. You're on mute if you're talking, Dave.
Sorry, the controls on the bottom of the phone. So I just want to clarify, the intent is to set that, at the AGM? And so every year, if you were to modify it, you would just, obviously it's going to be the same for every team. It's just a matter of knowing what that amount is going to be. Is that what people are concerned about?
It would be announced every year at the AGM under this language.
The idea is, I'm sorry, the idea is to announce it at the AGM, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for the clarification.
Is there a motion to vote? Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Discussion is closed. Please vote.
60 seconds again, folks. Fifteen seconds left. And yes, there are still people voting. We can trim down to 45 for the next one. Time's up. Proposal B passes.
Okay, we are moving to proposal C, international team fees. This is similar to the previous resolution recommendations. Currently, we have a fee of $750, and 500 of that goes to clinic development, 250 goes to general fund. The recommendation is to maintain that same proportionality, but to have flexibility by the board to adjust that fee as needed. That fee has not gone up in some time. Benefits of this is that it allows the board more discretion to adjust this as they are more familiar with the budget, and the limitations are that it would remove that control from the membership unless they elected to then put a future proposal together. Any discussion? Ryan.
I would ask for a friendly amendment to set a limit on this, like the other ones. I think we all know that there's people that don't agree with the international players, and so just in case the board would be in favor of trying to set the amounts higher to minimize that, I'd just like to see a maximum added.
Bob, as a sponsor,
I'm fine with adding a friendly amendment that the maximum increase in any 1 year is $100.
Okay, we have friendly amendment recommended, accepted. Justin.
Yeah, should we really keep the 2/3 and the percentage of what goes to developmental? Because like this past year, we got the Nielsen grant, which is probably more than we even need for clinics. So then it would create some flexibility to earmark more for general use than.
Would you recommend friendly amendment to allow the board to have more control of that, Bob?
I'm fine with changing it. My intent with the proposal was more about giving the board more say in choosing the amount. I'm fine changing the amendment to also allow greater discretion on where those funds go. That's fine with me.
Just to make sure we're clear, whoever's taking these notes, my understanding is Justin's request is to remove the statement about proportionality. Removing the sentence 2/3 of this fee will be used for clinic development and 1/3 used for general fund at the discretion of the executive committee. My understanding is that Justin's requesting that language be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, changed to something like these funds will be used to the discretion of the executive committee. Is that what you're
Correct.
recommending? Okay. Do you support that, Bob?
Yes.
Okay. Additional comments? Yes, Dave.
This one seems to be one that comes up more often as far as talking about changing the amount. Would it make more sense to say, put it as an agenda item for every AGM, and if the board would like to raise it, we just discuss it there? Or would you rather keep it in the hands of where it is? I don't care either way. I thought.
Just to say that the rationale for me is we're fortunate that the teams elect the board and trust the board. So this allows the board the flexibility to make the decisions that are best for the league. And if teams feel that people on the board aren't doing the right thing, the recourse is to vote people off. Terms are relatively short.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Do we have a motion to vote?
Motion to vote.
Second.
Do it.
Okay, we're gonna go for 45 seconds, folks. It's now open. Fifteen seconds. Voting is concluded. Proposal C passes.
On to proposal D. Proposal D is a one-arm drive proposal. This was passed last year as a one-year proposal. This proposal is different. For those that are unfamiliar, this would allow individuals who have certain disabilities below a certain level of education the option to utilize a one-arm drive chair. The initial thought for having it exist in one-year fashion was to sort of test it out. Only one player in the league utilized a one-arm drive chair, to our knowledge. This proposal does two things. One is it allows them to continue to use that chair in non-sanctioned games in perpetuity. So it does codify this regulation. Additionally, the WWR had told us at one point that if we did things that put us out of compliance, that would not allow us to clearly stand internationally. So what this also states is, but there has been some discussion with WWR, very preliminary with some of their members, that maybe there's an opportunity for them to allow this to be utilized on a trial run in the league. So what this also does is it allows for the opportunity for sanctioned games on a temporary or permanent basis if WWR does. So it's sort of, it's a check mechanism. This wouldn't go into effect unless WWR allows us to do this temporarily or permanently in postseason. Otherwise, we can't do it in postseason because it would put us out of compliance. The advantages of this is it would allow for individuals with unique disabilities that may not find success in the sport, specifically with one player in the league currently, but potentially with others. Due to the nature of their disability, they may find more success competitively Any concerns about this could be that it might be utilized for performance enhancement or give an unfair player advantage because an individual may be able to utilize this in a way that we have not previously seen. Those are the sort of the overarching views. At this time, we'd like to open this for discussion. Oh, saw a hand up. Yes, Dave.
I think just for a point of clarification here, after many conversations about compliance with the WWR while I was commissioner, WWR has never threatened to flag us non-compliant. All the non-compliance discussions have come from the U.S. Paralympic Committee, and in relation to them looking at what we're doing compared to what WWR does and the concerns that the IPC has with lack of compliance. So just as a point of clarification, I think it makes sense. We need to talk to WWR and ask them whether they consider it to be non-compliant. But I don't think that is the place that this is going to end up being decided when it comes down to it.
Thank you. Is Amy or our
Yes.
election representative online to discuss
I
this?
am. So actually Dave is correct. And it wasn't WWR directly that made us non-compliant. WWR was what we were compared to. It was actually by USOPC, IPC, and then WWR jumped on the boat with it because they want what they have to be the standard. When we're communicating on this issue, I actually have talked to IPC. I've actually talked to USOPC. Jen's been very helpful in this. We've submitted things in writing or waiting for an answer. This falls under a different category because using a piece of equipment to change the impairment changes the classification. This is not just seen with the one-arm drive chair. It is at international level, not just in our sport, but every sport. So Ann Hart was in charge of making sure compliance across all sports and all classifications was compliant. That's the level this is at. They're also going to look at it in terms of other things, such as use of what people are using for limbs. So are they using their prosthetics and not seeing with their prosthetics, and what impact does that have? They are going to come out with a ruling on this after 2024, after the games in 2024, and there will be more clarification on this. The interesting thing I did get back from WWR, not IPC and USOPC, which is where we got to go with this next, is they do realize this is coming up internationally. Right now, it's not allowed in sanctioned games internationally, but if we wanted to try it and we could maybe be part of a trial on how it does impact function and play with the use of it, and we can maybe be a part of making this available or not available in the future, and to have some more play in that international world. So we're not just being told the decisions, we're actually being a part of making the decisions.
Excellent.
So we'll talk to all the people involved. We've been on many calls about this.
Thank you for doing that research, Amy.
Chris.
Yeah, hey guys. So initially this was written up for a civic athlete, Kyle Travoya, and he's 0.5 on the high five storms. And he has got CP, and he essentially uses one arm to push skills, goes back and forth, which brought him using his elbow on the other side. And frankly, it's costing him he level. We were trying to find
Hey, Chris, you're breaking up really bad.
Chris, we can't hear you. I think you got to put your phone or your computer not on your lap, because when you're shaking it, it's messing up your connection. We're not able to understand you.
Let me raise my hand. Go ahead.
Hey guys, let me put my.
We can start video if you want.
Hang on, guys.
Better now. As long as you don't move your arms, I think you're okay, Chris. We can hear you.
Okay, I'll try not to gesture. So I don't know how much of that you just heard, but can you hear me better now?
Every time you move, it's worse. Just try to stay real still.
Okay.
Okay.
So the bottom line is, it was written up specifically for an athlete on our team Kyle Treboya, 0.5. And it works for him. It allows him to be included and he can play without pain. And that's essentially what this is all about. And it was written up for 1.0 athletes or less. So we didn't want it to be an apparatus advantage, if you will. We just wanted to get Kyle included. And we also see that in postseason, back to his old pain. So that's where it was.
Thank you.
Did you hear all that?
I think so. The only thing people might have missed is he said at the end that postseason he played with his old chair, which caused him pain. Dave, what you got?
So Amy, you said something about this changing the player's classification. Obviously, he will have the ability to do more than his 0.5 classification if he has a one-arm drive, because his one arm is significantly better than the other. So how does something like this, how will you weigh this in classification?
Okay, so the answer to that is we can't weigh that in classification because that would get into the issue that we just got ourselves out of with the age. What used to be deductions, now they're adjustments that is in competition play. So right now, when we see him, because we'll see him in sanctioned games, we'll see him in what is deemed internationally right now as a legal chair, he'll be a 0.5. If you guys want to make an amendment, I know Chris is one of the original versions of this proposal I saw was that it would change his classification by 0.5 point. We can't do that. But my thing is, if you guys, yes, it does change what he's able to do on the court. It does probably put him borderline to be in a different class in this chair. Okay. So if you guys want to put something like that in, it has to go through a competition rule. It's nothing I can do as a classification. And that's why International is looking at this. So I will give you guys another example what they're looking at. If you see the new front ends now that some of the chairs have on them, what has been seen some of the amputees doing is not strapping their waist belts in tight and almost coming up during hits or during throws and pushing their limb on there or putting an extender to push it on there. And then it's an advantage because then their trunk is not accurate anymore. It's changing their impairment. So that's what needs to come from IPC and how we handle it. For now, if you guys want to do something with the classification, you can't do it with the classification. But if you feel like when he's playing in non-sanctioned games, you want to have an adjustment added, you guys can make that an addendum proposal, but his classification cannot change.
That's not what I meant.
Okay.
There's a component of classification where you watch a person in their chair do rugby skills.
This is correct.
And so when you classified this person in a chair that was not one arm drive, is there a potential that he would have a different classification based on his play when you consider that in
Yes.
the one arm drive chair? Okay.
Yes, which is the question whether the equipment is legal or not, which is why this still has to stay in non-sanctioned games. And I will tell you, in Birmingham, we were running around like crazy because we had so many athletes to see. And I did not know that Kyle was in his chair. That was the one arm drive chair, and they started classifying him. And I actually had to write to IPC, USOC, and we're still in the process of submitting all that, Jen and I are, but we notified them what we did because that would have put us as being non-compliant. So that's why I requested that until we get a blessing from all the powers that be that talk about compliance, this needs to stay in non-sanctioned games. So when we're classing him, we are only seeing him in what's deemed as of now a legal piece of equipment. That doesn't give a mechanical advantage, that changes the impairment.
And just to confirm, and I see one individual's got their hand up. Just to confirm, this proposal would only allow them to play in sanctioned games if we were given presumably guidance and a blessing from international guidance. There's a hand. Tegan is the name there. Yes, please.
It's Ed Olson from the Storm. I just wanted to remind everybody, this is a pretty straightforward proposal. It's not about classification. It's allowing Kyle to use a one-arm drive chair before postseason, which is not very controversial. And if at some other time we want him to be able to use his one-arm drive chair in postseason play, we'll deal with that. But for right now.
You have to ask for a friendly amendment because this is allowing it.
Okay, all right. So it's just allowing him to play in his one-arm chair.
Thank you. And I have a message from Alex Yoder. If you'd like to speak, please.
Yes. So my question is with the classification a little bit. How does this differentiate? I am involved with other NGBs like for wheelchair basketball and sled hockey. How does this differentiate from like wheelchair basketball, because they get classed with a one-arm drive chair as well? like, and their classification doesn't change based on their one-arm drive chair versus their typical just chair without the one-arm drive, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So
I
why
can
would it change for us?
I can answer that. We, out of all the classification systems, and we actually just did a conference with the 50th anniversary conference this fall or this spring in Atlanta on this for the Asia Association. We are the most in detailed classification the system they are. So for example, when you talk about wheelchair basketball classifiers, they do not have to have a medical background. They not do the extensive muscle testing that we do. They not do the extensive truck testing we do. They actually go just on court observation. So they do not have limits based on their equipment because they do it in whatever equipment they present in. Because what our system is looked at isn't on how a person plays on the court. It's only a piece of making that what we see there has to match what their impairment testing is. We are an impairment-based model, and we started out of that because we were a spinal cord injury sport, and we're trying to level the playing field between spinal cord injury, CP, and amputees. I'll also comment on that. This year, we've had wheelchair or the water skiing team had a classification, an international classifier, come to some of our events and ask us about our system. We've had wheelchair basketball come and look at our system because they want to go to more of an impairment-based system than an observational system that's more objective. So that's the difference in the classification systems, is we're much more of an impairment-based system, and other systems are looking at coming toward our classification system.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions, or do we have a motion to vote?
I'll motion to vote.
Second.
Run it.
Forty-five seconds. And it's closed. Proposal D passes.
I have one hand up right now. Ron, did you want to speak on that previous discussion and just got your hand up, or was it something else? Your hand went down.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, proposal E, international player definition. Again, just the refresher that everyone knows, each team is allowed one international player. The purpose of this establishing rule was to develop more domestic players and not rely specifically on international players for predominantly elite teams. This particular proposal would provide clarification on what an international player is. Historically, an individual who plays for another national team is deemed an international player, or at least not exclusively, but could be, right? So this provides clarity for an individual whom is has dual citizenship in the US and may elect to compete for an international team for another country. And this ruling would allow individuals in that position to not count towards the international player if they are a US citizen, but playing for another country. The benefits of this is it would allow for American citizens to continue to not count as international players for the purposes of their team, because they are in fact US citizens. But any limitation to that would be, or I guess the antithesis to that position would be that it would in fact be developing more international players and less domestic players, plausibly on a given team. At this time, we'd like to open this up for debate and discussion. I do not see any hands. We'll wait just one more minute. Do we have a motion to vote?
I motion.
I think there's a hand up. Chris has got his hand up. Chris?
Hey guys, hopefully you can hear now. Sound better?
Not really. We can't really hear you.
Okay, let me give this a go. If it doesn't sound better, I might do Olsen on his teams as well. A lot of mine is Garcia. David was born and raised in Jersey, and he recently moved to California. He's up for 2 years, and he's class 3.5. He has his family, talking about his parents, grandparents, etc., live in Colombia. They introduced him to the sport to him 2 years ago. He never used a chair for anything. He's got 2 prosthetics, and he has classified as a 3.5. He would like to play with the Colombian national team, but he's not an import. He's from New Jersey. And so we would like this rule amended so that he can play with us locally, play with Team Colombia internationally, and we also can bring in an import if we like that. That's what we're trying to do here.
Yes, Ed, please. Please, by all means. Ed.
Hi, this is Ed Olson from the Storm again. I couldn't hear Chris, so I doubt anyone else heard Chris. So David is a player who's played for our team. He'll be coming up in his third. He was. Can you hear me, Mike?
We can hear you.
Okay, so David was born and raised here. He's a United States citizen. He was born in New Jersey. He lives in California. He lives in Davis, California. He plays as a domestic player, but because of his parents' connection to Colombia, he's a dual citizenship. He has dual citizenship, and he's interested in playing for Colombia for whatever reasons. I think he has, he's proud to represent the country of origin of his parents. But we feel that because he was born and raised here and he's a United States citizen, he should be able to play for Colombia, but maintain his domestic player status.
Thank you. Any additional commentary or discussion? Do we have a motion to vote?
I motion to vote.
Can you take me off mute?
Second.
Let's run it.
45 seconds, folks. Fifteen seconds left. And voting is closed. This proposal passed.
Okay, we are now moving to proposal F. This proposal functions very much similar to the Oscar Mike proposal a few years ago. It allows for a non-geographic team of female athletes, not including our geographic rules for transfers and 150 miles. This would be a 1-year recommended review next year. So this does not codify things permanently, but is a 1-year rule. It allows an all-women's team to register together without any sort of constraints that you would have under traditional geographic teams. The rationale to sort of promote this is that an all-women's team may support additional female participation, as we've seen some growth internationally in women's wheelchair rugby would allow for more women to train together in the US and might promote more additional female participation. The downside is that women leaving their teams could negatively impact their team's performance, and it does circumvent the rule of geography. Those are sort of pluses and minuses why an individual might choose to vote for this. Is there any discussion on the matter?
Mike, this is Gary Sellers. I sponsored this, and I'd like to share a little bit. The purpose of this is to have a positive, low barrier environment for developing an entry-level female wheelchair rugby athletes in the USA. Why do we need this? Because women are underrepresented in wheelchair rugby. because we should be a leader in the world. We would be the first country in the world to have a recognized women's team. And because it brings funding opportunities in. The goal is to provide more structure and support for those entry level and developing women athletes, and to position ourselves as an official body for the purposes of securing funding. So there's a women, the Wonder Women is a group of women who have been playing wheelchair rugby together unofficially for forfeit games at different tournaments for several years. The difference is this would allow us to be an official body so I can seek grants and funding to pay for travel expenses. We want to be able to pay for team fees, equipment, competition fees, travel expenses. And I doubt we'll have enough rostered players to really compete the first couple of years without having to forfeit. That's where that travel funding comes in to be able to pay for players that are possibly rostered elsewhere, prominent female wheelchair rugby athletes in the nation and in Canada to join us and help develop our players here in the US. So I don't anticipate this pulling women from who are already on rosters away from their original teams, as this It looks like I dropped out for a second, but I hope that you will support this.
Okay, Sarah, you have your hand up.
Yeah, more as an inquiry. So I totally support development. I think everybody knows that. I'm super into it. Obviously, female development in the league. I'm a female athlete myself, so something I want to see moving forward. Of course, we stated that, if females probably aren't going to come from their primary teams, some of the more elite athletes in the league, I almost see that as a detriment to some degree. Like, you would want to encourage them to participate and help develop other females if there was an opportunity. I honestly don't know the bylaws and if it would be a violation, but is there any way to allow both? Like, because there is a small number of females, it just in terms of the 110 spinal cord injuries that happen a year, I think 20%, if you're lucky, is going to be women. So like, could there be a women's team and still allow those females to participate potentially on their primary roster?
The way this is currently written, no. And my guess is that it would be very challenging for women would probably have to formally roster with one team or another, because you couldn't have teams that could in theory be eligible for postseason in both. Now, during regular season games, individuals often periodically will play with other teams, so that's plausible. But in terms of when you move towards postseason, the answer to that would be no.
Makes sense.
Ryan.
Just wanted to point out, you could make this team without this passing with the new transfer rules for anyone who's played with their team. If you start up the all women's team and just have women transfer to your team, you could still get your team without this proposal. So I just wanted to point that out.
You would, but their teams would have to.
Thank you for adding that.
Yeah. Although those women would have to, their teams would have to allow for transfer, and they would have had to play for 3 more seasons. But under those circumstances, the answer is yes, for sure. BV.
That's me. Sorry, this is my computer. No, I do like this, and I think it is a way to be, it's intimidating. I have a friend who would be an excellent low point female from college, and I think this has been one of the barriers of trying to get her to come out and play. So I would like to see it work. Audrey, when you say getting it to build up for 3 years, are you anticipating that this would become a postseason team, or are you looking more for that? Is it possible for women to register and then, at a certain tournament, yes, you would be technically disqualified, but is that what you're looking for right now? More like one tournament, or are you looking for a full registered team?
I'm looking for, I'd be happy with a few rostered athletes. And then, having the format as an official team, and hopefully eventually some kind of nonprofit body to be able to get money, get grants to pay for folks who are not rostered, people like Liz, people like Emily Shryock. people like
Okay.
Brianna from Canada, et cetera.
So formally rostered. Okay.
Right.
No, I'm just thinking of how to help. Yeah.
Does that make sense? I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is that it would, my goal is not to have a bunch of people rostered, and my goal is not to play official games. My goal is to go to tournaments and to help develop athletes. And then, we'll see where we are in a couple of years for postseason.
So Dave and then Alex.
So at least technically, you shouldn't have to do forfeits, no matter what team it is that shows up at a tournament, unless you have players who are non-classifiable or unclassified. So if you're not intending to go as far as postseason, I guess I don't understand what the benefit of this proposal is. My concern would be that I have 8 or 12 female athletes. If you were to roster them, leave 8 or 12 teams, and then we would have less females represented throughout the league if that were to happen.
Yeah,
But
I understand.
I want you to be able to, I think it's a great idea to train together and to be able to go to tournaments and have your performance be measured against people and see an actual score. I don't know why you're being forfeited unless you have players on your roster who are unclassified or not classifiable or outside, whatever those are.
Right. Yeah, I understand the risk there, and I understand your point. I think where that's coming, this is like all an idea, the where that's coming from is the collective interest in having all women's rugby that I saw when I was at the Women's Wheelchair Rugby Cup in Paris in March. There's a lot of interest and international interest to come together and build that up. But I understand your point, and I do see an advantage there too.
Alex.
Hi. So I'll say this, I'm very supportive of this women's team. I would like to ask the executive board, why is there a possibility of some other NGBs do this where they have a women's division, separate from the rest of the teams, and then the women's division competes against each other and then has their own little postseason, kind of like the low pointer division. Would that be something we would consider?
Most everything we do gets driven by membership. So if there's interest in that, we would definitely, I don't think anyone would be opposed to it, right? I think it would depend on what it would look like. But if that's a membership once, I think we could be very much in support of that. My 2 cents. I don't know. Any thoughts, Bob, on your end, Commissioner?
The only hard part about separate division for women is the numbers. I mean, currently, I don't know that there's enough women for more than 2 teams. So, I think there's a bare minimum number of teams you would want to have before you would start a division.
Okay. Another thing with this women's team, how they're forming, is there a possibility, how Sarah kind of was saying, if they could be rostered on both, and then maybe instead of the women's team possibly just not being able to qualify for postseason currently for a little bit, they just they go back to their original teams for when postseason starts, but then throughout the season they can play on this women's team and be rostered on both.
That is how it's functioned in the past. The teams historically, there's been maybe a women's team to compete in one tournament a year, I think. But Audrey, you'd know that better.
Yeah, about some years nothing, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm understanding that correctly, that sounds good to me.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Sarah?
Yeah, so I think as we look to grow the sport internationally, it's definitely going to go that route. I mean, the same way that low points happening, right? But just being at the grassroots level, you know, I compare it, and I actually had this conversation with Joe Delgrave a few years back on a podcast. So like, you know, if we're looking at women's soccer, like that was very successful, but it took a very long time to kind of ramp up and build, and they did a great job of it. I go on the other hand of like women's Frisbee. So it was very much co-ed in the beginning, and they were a little bit premature in breaking off. So what they found was the men's league went and they took all the funding, and men's is professional and they're on that level now. But the women's league never really took off. You know, they have a professional women's league, but it's just not where it kind of should be based on that decision. So based on our numbers as women in the sport, like Bob said, you know, we don't necessarily have enough to run a full league. And I think we absolutely need to build towards it, especially on an international spectrum. But I would be hesitant just to do it too soon, because I don't want to basically have it fizzle out, right? Because women deserve a place in the sport. They don't want to be preemptively removed from the Paralympic level of competition, especially for those who are competing in that place right now. And we just don't know where they're going to go with it. So I would just be hesitant to kind of pigeonhole anybody in one direction too early, would just be my thought. By all means, again, I'm in support of whatever the team wants to do, but just kind of thinking about it dynamically.
Amy?
My only request is when you're doing this, I know Audrey, some of the athletes that you had mentioned on this call aren't legally classed in this country. They're not eligible and not CRNE. Okay. So I would hope if we move forward with this, and this is why some of the women's teams in the tournaments we've been at had to forfeit, was because they had players that have been deemed non-eligible or non-classifiable. That I hope if we move forward with this, that, you know, I really want to think a women's team would be great to put together and be able to compete and see where they fall at. But I think it needs to be with legally rostered athletes. And if we're rostering a team, it certainly has to be with legal athletes.
Are we comfortable moving to vote? Are there additional comments?
I just have one quick comment, or my concern is cannibalizing female players from club teams around, and then if they are indeed an official team that can compete in postseason, we're obviously talking about 4 gender adjustments, so they'll be fielding a 10-point team basically as well. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of those things.
Thank you. Any additional discussion, or do we want to vote? If there's no additional discussion, I need a motion to vote.
Motion to vote.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Let's vote.
Ten seconds left. Voting is closed.
Can you vote? Can you mute him for us, Mike?
Already did it.
Thanks. Okay, the motion has passed. On to proposal G. This is part of a series of proposals on postseason adjustment. This first proposal is to go back to what the structure was before this season. So we are currently in a 18 team postseason. This is to move back to a 8 team, two division postseason that would allow for 2 pool play. Otherwise, it completely mirrors the previous model. So this is there interest in moving back to the previous structure? The previous structure does require less games for both the host and for teams to play during the event. And those are both reasonable, as well as less strains for transportation requirements for nationals hosts. Individuals who might not support this would point to closer game scores during the new model and more competitive games. So with the 3-division model. And with that, we will go ahead and open this up to discussion. Yes, Ryan.
Just wanted to point out, it doesn't exactly go back to the old model. It does have the additional crossover that we do in semifinals.
Thank you for that. I apologize.
I just had a quick question. The following proposals all also talk about redoing postseason restructuring it. Do those need to be talked about before you vote on this one? It just seems like if you vote on this one, you don't need to discuss the other ones. Just my thought.
That is correct. If this passes, other ones go out the window. Dave.
Just for my 2 cents, I understand that it's harder to host with more games, but I think this year's Nationals was great. I think that
That's not all. What
happened? His eyebrows. I was like, thank God.
She didn't send me her hairdresser. Amy stood over her shoulder and told her exactly what happened. Yeah.
Billy B, if you could please assist us, she keep coming off mute. Thank you. Dave, can you continue?
I was just trying to say that I think the level of competition was excellent. I liked seeing more teams at Nationals, and I think this went really well. I was a little bit skeptical beforehand, but I think the new format is, at least for the first experiment, went swimmingly.
Thank you. Ryan.
I would agree, Dave. I partly proposed this just because I didn't know how Nationals was going to go, so I wanted the option to vote.
Do you want to rescind your proposal?
No, I'm okay with voting and see how it goes. I'm still not sure how I'm going to vote, but
BV.
I think Sarah's probably going to say the same thing. I'm just I'm just speaking on behalf of the teams that kind of, are in that lower, well, not lower, but in the D3. Definitely we didn't make it, but would be in a D3 position. I do think it is, it makes Nationals and postseason more exciting if you are playing teams that you've played all season and are equally matched with, when you're playing as a 16 seed and you're having to go in against teams that are clearly dominant. It does make it more challenging, and it doesn't make it as much fun. So I do like the three divisions.
Mac,
absolutely.
Sarah.
I do like the 3 divisions. I thought Nationals went very good in terms of just being a little bit more tight in the competition. Exciting to watch. One thing, so you said we're only going to go over one potentially if it passes. One of the things Ryan did propose in one of his future proposals was the consideration of only having 2 games a day. So I do know that impacted a lot of people. I know it's harder on some of the athletes depending on, level of function, things of that nature. I'm not going to say I go one way or the other on it. I'm open to it. But I definitely, before we vote on this, I almost want to have that discussion. Because it's something that should be considered. How did it weigh on other teams, other athletes? Do they think we could expand Nationals? Understanding that obviously, Mike said, Noah said, we're trying to expand the sport and the visibility. So we might need to be open to a longer event. And then of course, if we end up bringing AGM back in person, that additional day is beneficial for that. So just bringing that to the table for thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like we can vote on the whether this passes or not, there are a couple different, especially with this being a double crossover, there will be some discussion on does this go to an extra day of Nationals or not? That's a great question. That we'll have to cover that for sure. Other questions, comments?
Just a motion to vote.
Any seconds?
Second.
I'll second it. Yeah.
Let's vote.
45 seconds. $15. $5. Closed. Proposal did not pass.
Okay, on to proposal H. 3 different opponents. This proposal would create an additional expectation. We sort of have these 2 sections during the regular season, with the first date before December 1st and the second before February 15th, that during each window, you must play 3 different opponents. You can't, in theory, play a bunch of games against 1 team or 2 teams. They can, in fact, be the same 3 opponents before December 1st and then again before February 15th. We did get clarity there. So basically, in short, in each section of the season, you must be playing 3 different individuals. The rationale to promote this would be that more competition against different teams is going to be more informative for the competition committee and probably more enjoyable for the players. The downside is that for teams that are geographically isolated or who have smaller budgets, this will be an additional expense and challenge for them as they look to meet those expectations. This time I'd like to open this up for discussion.
Yeah, this is Steve Kenny. Again, Ryan, as part of the competition committee, shared our frustration this year with, and it was more glaring this year because there was one particular team who did not play very many games, though had an impressive roster. And it's challenging as a committee to try to rank a team based on their roster when they're not playing games or opponents. And this, we as a league have a requirement that a player must at least play in 2 games prior, in the first half of the season and the second half of the season. So this proposal is making a requirement for a team to at least play 3 different opponents, which we don't think is that challenging. It just requires a team to go to 1 4-team tournament in the first half of the season and the second half of the season. There's plenty of tournaments. 1 4-team tournament will fulfill your requirement there. We'll play 3 different teams. And then those teams will play other teams. So if we don't have head-to-head comparisons, at least we have common opponent comparisons in order to rank a team based on their performance and not on their roster. So this would help that particular challenge, as well as increase participation in the league, and increase visibility as well. So that's kind of would help the frustration that the committee expressed in our report.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Additional comments? Do we have a motion to vote?
Motion to vote.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Let's vote.
15 seconds left. 5. Closed. Proposal H passed.
Okay, on to proposal I. Elimination of host team nationals automatic bid. This proposal would remove language that the individual who hosts nationals receives an automatic bid into nationals. Previously, we struggled to get nationals hosts, so this was created as an incentive to incentivize additional individuals to consider hosting nationals. The argument for doing this is really with this rule in place, you don't necessarily get the top 18 teams in the country. You get the top 17 teams in the country and another team. The downside to this is A, you potentially lose incentivization of a host, and B, you lose a home team crowd, which can often be a substantial portion of your crowd, which can induce attendance. With that, we'll leave this open to discussion. Sarah.
Yeah, I need somebody else to start talking jeepers. But I will speak because obviously I was part of Shepherd when it impacted us a couple years ago. And obviously Philly made the addendum. It happened to impact them this year. But what I will say is, just from a cost to the team affected or potentially affected, in the first year, obviously that was potentially like a one and done game. So that was a whole lot of money to put out. Appreciate Philly kind of revamping it, but also looking at, the cost to play a season. So of course you're talking about two teams that were funded and we're very lucky for that. But it could also impact a team that's not. So the example of a team that's not funded, that paid to play all year and compete, and then is removed from nationals, I struggle with that, right? Because they're putting their personal money forward, their personal time and effort throughout the season. So, I know to this point, again, it's only impacted a team that was funded, but God forbid it's somebody else. That's something we really need to consider as a league of like how right is that.
I just want to make sure you're understanding as well, or maybe this is miscommunicated. So I know at one point there was a play-in game. Currently now, they just automatically qualify for nationals and a team is removed from nationals. So there's no longer a play-in game.
Correct. But again, playing the whole season, paying to play the whole season, and then being removed from competition, that's a lot, especially for a team that isn't, explicitly funded like a Shepherd or a McGee.
Thank you. Thank you. Bob Lopez.
The only thing is, I would say is the same as what you've already said, Mike, is that it's difficult to get hosts for nationals. I think it's really important that we allow that team to get a spot at nationals. I understand it knocks another team out, but I think it's really important, and that's all I really have to say about it.
Ryan.
So on top of Sarah's comment there, even if you're funded, you're putting a lot of your personal time into this all season to then just be knocked out. And to Bob's comment, some of these teams, do you really want, is it a good thing, depending on the caliber, for them to be seen at nationals? Depending on who possibly gets it, that might not be a positive experience.
Thank you. Dave.
I just wanted to ask if you guys could remind us how Oscar Mike did this year. They were the team, right? The host team. Although I think they were a bubble team. They were pretty close to qualifying. Did they win any games at nationals this year? I don't know.
I do not believe they did they? Did not.
Did they have close games? I got the impression they had at least one close game.
One or two close games.
Okay. All right. Just asking for perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Mason. Mason. Mason, are you there? Your hand's up.
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to get off mute. I agree with both sides. when we found out that we were awarded the spot, it kind of didn't feel right as an athlete. We did struggle, but I'm proud of us. We know we worked really hard all year, but at the same time, I feel like collectively we felt like that too. And so yeah, we feel the pains.
Thank you. Justin?
I mean, this is based on in the past when we couldn't get national host. It seems like the tide is trending a little bit. I mean, I know certainly we're a team that put in this year, as well as Oscar Mike. I've heard cities that have talked about potentially 2 years down the road, them being in a situation where they could. So, I mean, I think this is maybe a rule that was put in looking back when it was very challenging, and we had to go to cities sometimes 3, 4, 5 years in a row. So I don't think that. I think it's time to kind of move away from that and do what's best for the competition in the league. I mean, if we want to be a professional organization, you should have the 18 best teams that qualify there.
As one of 3 people on this call who have tried to find national hosts, I don't know that we can call one time having 2 people bid is a tide. I think we can't really count on that. It seems too early to do that.
But you're also getting multi-year bids now, whereas in the past we used to have to go year to year.
Well, that's why we did it. If we could get somebody to commit for 3 years, then we didn't have to spend the entire year begging and pleading with people and conceding things that we expect in our package just to get somebody to step up and host.
I saw BV's name is up as well. Hand up. Did your hand go down?
No, Justin pretty much covered it. I was going to say, given that we have, 2 bids right now, it is a major concern to not have a national host though. So I see that side of it. But it is something that can definitely be proposed in the future if needed, if we do have that difficulty.
Thank you. Anyone else, or do we have a motion to vote?
Motion to vote.
Second.
Let's vote.
45 seconds. Five seconds left. And we're closed. This proposal passed.
On to proposal J, 2 games a day at nationals. For those of you that are unfamiliar, nationals was a 6-game series, and it looks like it will be again this year. So that requires with a 3-day event, 2.5-day event, that requires 1 day to have 3 games. This proposal would maximize the number of games per day to be 2. So the most plausible form that this would take place would be like a 2-game Thursday, 2-game Friday, 2-game Saturday, or 2-game Friday, 2-game Saturday, 2-game Sunday model. Alternatively, it could be like a 1-game Thursday night, 2-game Friday, 2-game Saturday, 1-game Sunday. But in essence, it's probably going to add a travel day, or at least 1 additional day to teams who travel to nationals. The hotel expenses, the court expenses, and what have you. It would, however, allow fatigue to not play as much of a role in performance of teams, and may allow for better performance on the court and less of an issue of fatigue impacting results. So those are sort of the benefits and limitations of this proposal. I would like to open up discussion. Yes. Marianne.
Yeah, just from an official's point of view, we have implemented a low point league, which is during the summer. And if you are talking about putting games in on Thursday, it would have double impact on us. One, we would not be able really have the time to do our clinic, which we usually do that Thursday before tournament play starts. Two, you're asking people to take more time off work. We're basically going to a full year-round season, and I don't know how well we're going to be able to staff a full year-round season if you're talking about adding another day of playing games on Thursday.
Thank you, Justin.
Yep, agree with everything Marianne said. The only, I mean, as an athlete, you know, 3 games in a day is not ridiculous. My only caveat to that is that the schedule should be balanced and similar amongst all 3 divisions. You know, we kind of got the unfortunate draw as a number 4 seed to have to play the 1, 2, and 3 seed in the same day, just because the way it worked out. So that was the only issue I would have, is that all 3 divisions should play the same schedule on the same days. So I mean, I would make a little bit longer day, but that's the equal thing to do.
Thank you, Amy.
I echo a little bit of what Marianne said. Certainly most of the people that are classifying are working as well, but I also want you guys to think about the impact on you all. If we start play on Thursday, that means we'll start classification on Wednesday morning, which means teams need to be there by noon on the day before the tournament so that your first slot is at 12 or 1 o'clock. We did pretty well this year, but still a lot of teams had trouble getting there early for their athletes to be seen. We saw 20 athletes the first day. So we need people to get in. So just think about that, not in terms of the burden on referees and classifiers in general, but on your teams, extra hotel nights, extra or travel is extended. And as the host, you guys have to provide venues for us and the teams.
Thank you, Ryan.
So my intentions were not at all to be a Thursday game. It was adding 2 games on Sunday, which I think is still doable. Most teams should still be able to get out of there on Sundays if they want to. It is going to be later flights and stuff. There might be some exceptions. I just think the 3 games in one day, even if you're not playing, that's a long day. I was curious for the refs, like how they felt about having that many games during the days. I just think if it's nationals, we should be treating it like a bigger deal. And maybe that means you got to go to 1 less tournament during the season, potentially, as a player and stuff. That's my thoughts.
Just to speak for the refs, I was not there but from the discussions I've had, they were extremely long days. I know with post game and then dinner, I know some of you weren't going to bed till 1 a.m. and up and at it again 7 a.m. the next morning. So I still don't think the better solution is to put a whole another day, longer day on Sunday as possible. But again, you might have a couple challenges getting out. They were long days. And when I looked at the schedule, that was my concern. So if that answers your question, I was not there attending, but that is what I've heard from people who were.
This is Steve Kenny, and just my thoughts would be, sure, 3 games in one day might be challenging for an athlete or for a team, especially a team that might be playing 4 men Ironman rugby. But having 3 games is also encouraging to have a deeper team, have more than 1 line. So it's rewarding a better team, not the best 4 guys as well. So, you know, stamina, team depth, nationals and postseason is supposed to be a grind. So I personally don't have an issue with it.
Any additional discussion? Do we have a motion to vote?
So motioned.
Do we have a second?
Oh, damn it.
Second.
Let's vote.
Hey, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand real quick, but
Oh, they got the vote up. No, I'm sorry, man.
that's all right. I was, since we're voting and it doesn't really matter right now, I guess I'll just give my thoughts on how it would have helped the proposal maybe. If we switched it to a Saturday night end, which I've always thought would be awesome and even help with attendance for spectators, that would actually help the 2 game per day proposal. It would just have to start a day early.
Motion does not pass. On to K, Nationals reseating. This just puts some clarity. We had some inconsistency in our language. The top 5 finishers, basically the way the language reads in our document is that individuals, teams that finished in a certain spot would be designated to a certain division and would move on. However, we have, and the competition committee has reseeded the teams. So this would basically make the language consistent with what we do, which is a reseeding of the teams after the semifinals and before nationals. It makes a lot more sense for us to do this. I'm not sure that there's a downside unless you feel like your finishing spot in nationals will completely be dependent on your spot. The finishing spot in semifinals should completely be dependent on your spot in nationals. Dave.
This is just language cleanup in the Constitution, right? Because we already do this in practice.
Exactly. This is a policy that's already existing in practice. This is just merely making the language consistent with our practice.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I
Motion
just
to
would
vote.
say-
Yeah, Bob, was that?
I'm gonna say that's exactly it, because the way it is currently in the bylaws is they're conflicting, so we followed the longer standing bylaw this past season, which was reseeded.
Do we have any additional discussion?
Motion to vote.
Second.
Let's vote.
Fifteen seconds. Five. Proposal K passed.
Okay. Proposal L, age allowance modification. I'm going to give a little background on the numbers here just to give you guys some clarity. First of all, what this proposal does is it maintains classification for individuals, or the age modification, age allowance modification for individuals under 16 for female players. And also, but it removes the 45 to 55 allowance modification. It then, instead of being at 1 point at 55, would be half a point. Instead of being at a point and a half, 65 would be 1 point. When this rule was enacted, there was a large number of players who were leaving the sport at the age of 41, 42, 43. The average age of the sport was quite young and players were aging out. The purpose of this was to keep older players in longer. At the time, the oldest player in the league was 52. I actually remember this discussion. This rule has been very successful in keeping older players in the league longer. However, the alternative position on this is that currently 26.25% of our sport is over the age of 45. And what at least is being proposed and discussed is that when you have players that are getting this age allowance modification at 45, it may in fact be limiting the development of younger players, or even potentially the introduction of younger players, as teams are sticking with older players who get an age modification and have more function and have significantly more experience. So our sport is without question older. The benefit of that is we're keeping quadriplegics healthier, playing longer, more engaged in the sport. The downside is we're very likely not introducing as many younger players as there's not as much of a need. So with that, I'll open up the discussion. Amy.
I would also like to say, because I remember when this rule was put in, we pulled a lot of research. I was still coaching at the time, and the majority of our league was still spinal cord injury. And it was based on the data available back when we had a large number in spinal cord injury and before incomplete injuries were as prevalent as they are now. So it also looked at respiratory capacity and fatigue with aging. I'm not sure that that's where we're at in our sport anymore with the number of spinal cords we have that are incomplete. Plus we have other groups with the amputees, the cerebral palsy, they're all playing now and they don't have the same respiratory impairments, which was part of what this rule was based on way back when.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Dave.
I know that for a good part of the time that these rules have been in place, and when we added the most recent one, we had between 40 and 45 teams in the league. How many do we have now? Right,
There's 36 teams that were registered the last 2 seasons.
Okay. I'm just curious about how we're looking at 25% of the league that's over 45, a little more than that. But we're not spread out as much. So I think that affects how many people you see with a adjustment on any team. Sorry, I almost said the R word. Shoot. Oh, I would love to see a friendly amendment here, similar to what they do in Canada, that anyone who plays on a national team, if they're competing at that level, that they don't need an adjustment.
Is Caleb on this call? Does not look like we can accept the friendly amendment if he is not on this call.
Okay, thank you.
Ryan.
So my couple comments, I guess. We've seen on our team personally, like having that reduction or addition now, having that veteran player, that also allows potentially for a new younger player to get on the court just because of the lineup. Sometimes it's who you have on your team matches up to who actually gets to play with the different point system. So I think it balances out some. I can personally say if this passes, I'll probably be leaving the sport sooner than later. But so I think there's good benefit for it. Keeping it the way we have it, not passing this. That's all I got.
Thank you. Steve.
Yeah, Ryan, you took the words right out of my mouth with the first part. The other part is I think that originally when this was passed, it's done exactly what we intended for it to do, which is to keep older players engaged in the sport. So that's why that percentage has grown over the years. It would be kind of cool to see the historical perspective though, if we could go back, because I don't want to confuse like a correlation with causation. I don't think because there are more older players in the league that there are fewer younger players. I think there's a lot of variables that need to be taken into account there. And I'm of the mindset as well. Look, obviously I'm one of the OGs and I'm one of these guys that's going to say, leave the OGs alone. But I've got younger low pointers on my team who are hungry and, they're pushing me every day to work harder, and I'm pushing them every day to work harder. So I think it's like a two-way deal there. And it's just a matter of how bad you want it and how much you want to work for it. And so again, I'll just leave with, I think we need to leave it the way it is. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Sarah.
I'm going to piggyback on that. I no longer coach Shepherd. Welcome to Andrew. He's great. But that team is held together by quite a lot of what we call OGs, right? But aside from even just the play, right? So, if you look at the difference between a Scott and a Zach. To me, they're interchangeable in my lineup. Scott is a lesser point value. That's just not the same classification. But, even if he were to go down, which he did, to a 0.5, it didn't necessarily help my lineup. It can for some people, but it opens opportunities for Scott, right? Can he go and play with Tampa in the low point league? He's continuing his career longer than he probably could with Shepherd because of that allowable. Now that we have that 0.5. So additionally, I'm going to speak from the coaching standpoint. So, as a coach in the league, there are only so many opportunities to learn and to grow. Our sport is small. It's a great community, but, if we lose these people preemptively from the league, if I were to lose Scott Stokes at Shepherd, I would not be who I am. If I were to lose Steve Curley and Low Point, again, those are names and people that are so impactful for this league that if they chose to leave because they were no longer able to compete, I think we would suffer more than we maybe planned. Furthermore, you can say the same about Scott Hogsett. I don't know where he is, but I know he's an OG now. And, what he's given to this sport and to this league is indescribable. So it's just something to think about. It's not just the on the court play, but, if we need to keep these people around if we want the sport to continue to grow and move forward.
Thank you. Noah.
Yeah, I think this isn't the proposal, and I've heard the talks about this, isn't to try to get rid of anybody that is older. I mean, I'm right about to get that deduction or addition myself, and and I don't think that I need it at 45. And I would even, like maybe the 55 and 65 is too drastic, but I think this is about changing lives and earlier. It's about developing players, and it's really just, like when you look at any tournament you go to, you'll see lines in an entire game where the additions are the biggest factor in the line out there. So you can see just on any game at any given time how that hinders growth or development. And I think that's really the reason behind the proposal. It's certainly not to get rid of people. I mean, everybody needs participation from people who have been there and done that, and the OGs, as you were saying, and especially from a coaching and mentorship perspective. But at 45 years old, do you really need the addition, and do you need to be taken away from an 18 or 21-year-old kid who really should be developed out on that court versus the one that's already been playing for a really long time? I feel like that's the entire intent behind this.
Thank you. Sid. You're on mute.
I was going to say the exact opposite of what is proposed as a negative aspect of the rule was the case for our team this year. We have a 3-5 that was able to get on the court, a very young 3-5 who was able to get on the court and develop more because we had players who had the adjustment, the age adjustment that would allow for that. So it really depends on the classification of the younger player and the OG, as we're calling them. And I've never heard a more aptly a more apt term of grandfather clause. I'd like to request a friendly amendment if this passes that we have a grandfather clause that if you're already whatever addition you already qualify for, that is not taken away. Thank you.
Thank you. The individual who sponsored this isn't on the call, so we can't make any friendly amendments, but yeah, thank you very much for that. Steve.
So this just came to me, so obviously too late to make a proposal, but maybe for future thought, capping the allowance, that might be something that the league would consider, to where, the point allowance is capped at 8.5 or 9. That way you don't end up with, that way you don't end up with 4 OGs on the court. You got a 10-point line out on the court, essentially. I think that would help to minimize some of the, some of the issues that could affect some of the younger players opportunity to get on the court. Again, it's going to be totally different for every team because, you know, as Sid just said, it actually helped his team. So there's not going to be like one, it's in black and white. So, but something to think of for the future, and we're actually doing this for Low Point, for the Low Point division this year, is, you know, we capped the on-court point allowance at 4.5, regulars 3.5. So you can have 2 OGs on the court, or a female and an OG on the court, and you can get, you know, your 4.5 point allowance. But just future thought, that may be something that, I don't know, maybe I'll propose that at some point in the future, but just something to think about. But for now, leave it alone.
Amy.
I just want to bring back Steve's point, I think, because we've both been around for a long time and we keep taking this role and comparing it to development of the league and losing and gaining teams. I don't know that when you look at the teams and what they've done in the last 25 years I've been around, it's just that they've shifted a little bit. The Northeast and the East Coast has more teams than it's ever had. I coached for Philly. We used to have our little section, then we had to fly to Tampa or Atlanta to get a game in. But I tell you what, I'd look at the West Coast and California had 5 teams. Seattle had a team. Portland had a team. Arizona had 2 teams. There was tons of teams out there. We're losing those teams now. I'm not sure it's related to the age deduction. It seems like just shift in where funding is. Some of the rehab hospitals have shut down that used to fund things in California. And now you see more of the shift that we've actually gained teams on the East Coast, and the Midwest is kind of gamed and moved teams around too. I'm not sure it actually relates to the 45 rule, and it certainly wasn't the intent of the 45 rule.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to vote?
I have one last comment to reiterate with Steve Curley is the thought or compromise of a new proposal next year that there is a cap on the age and gender adjustment. So at any point in time in a game on the court, there can only be one player that has either a gender or age adjustment on the floor. We have played Northeast Passage where they've had 10 points on the floor with 4 adjustments on there. And one is enough, I think. And actually, you'll see the starting lineups for each division championship this year, and their starting lineup had either an age or a gender adjustment player on the floor in their primary line. So I agree that I think it's good where we are right now, but next year there can be possibly a cap or an adjustment made. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to vote? Oh, sorry, we have a hand up. I'm sorry, Heather.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I just want to say in regards to that cap on one player, because if a female's on the court, she also has a deduction as well. And I don't necessarily think that would be fair in that regard. That's just my opinion.
Sure. So. Those are all great points. Let's focus on this. That proposal that's just a potential future.
Right. Yeah, I got it.
Yes, Ed.
Hi, everybody. This is David. David, I just want to say that for me, on my team, we have people who are older, and I would just say from a competitive standpoint, if you're a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old and you have somebody that's in their 40s or 50s, pushing harder than you, I think that's a motivation factor. So I think it's good to keep it. That's it.
Can I raise my hand?
Sure.
One last proposal. I know we can't make friendly amendments. I guess the guy who proposed the amendment isn't here, but next year you could think too, instead of capping the number of reductions, you could sort of split the baby and not make the reductions at 45 and 55, or sorry, 55 and 65, but maybe 50 and 60, kind of compromise there. Something for next year to consider if people are upset with the age reduction.
Let's focus on this specific proposal. If there are any other comments or questions, we can close our vote. Do we have a
Motion to vote?
We have a second.
Second.
Let's do it.
15 seconds left. 5. Closed. This proposal did not pass.
Last proposal, proposal M, university roster allowance. This proposal would allow for, currently we allow 1 international player. This would allow for 2 international players for university programs. And currently there's only 1 existence. But there may be a second one this year. If they meet certain criteria of being designated student athletes. The 4 for this rationale is intercollegiate programs can produce younger players. Younger players have been an effective pipeline for national team development. A proposal like this allows for collegiate programs to more similarly reflect intercollegiate programs in an able-bodied context. So it would allow for international participation and recruitment of up to 2 players. The downside of this is it is fairly limited in scope and that it only impacts 1 to 2 programs. And it would then change the designation of international player rules. So with that, let's open up for discussion.
It is, Bob. The only thing I would say is it doesn't limit it to 2. It just says it allows for student athletes. So it doesn't specify 2 in the proposal.
Dave.
As a member of what will be the other team that would qualify for this, I feel like this is a mistake. We're making an exception for teams, for 2 teams. And it doesn't seem fair to me that I understand the idea that having a player come in, but if we're going to do this, why would we only do it for teams that are sponsored by a university? Why wouldn't we do it for all universities? If someone comes to some university and they come from another country and they're not on another country, well, whether that it should be for everybody, not just for these 2 teams. But I don't think it's a good idea anyway. Now we got 2 internationals on multiple teams and we're going to change the league radically. It's my 2 cents.
Josh.
So this is Pete Hughes, baby, but he put me on here because he's not able to attend. When he talked about it with me, I thought it was going to be league wide for any team who has a student athlete from another country. So I didn't see the part that limited it to U of A and University of Michigan. So I would like to make a friendly whatever the word is, I can't think of it now, that changes it from a university program to any of the teams that have an international student going to a local college where they're at.
I'm not sure you can make that friendly amendment because the author's not here, but when I spoke.
He put me on there so that I can.
Okay. When he spoke to me about this, and again, just in confirmation, the concern was initially what's going to keep people from saying, I'm going to have the student in an online school that's going to be at this place. And now all of a sudden they're going to be an international student who's not even on this physical campus, who is going to be taking courses. So that was the rationale. He spoke to me about it. I mean, Bob's a parliamentarian. I assume if this is the representative for this institution, for this team, can they make a friendly amendment? Can they not? Do you have any thoughts on that? That's a question for either Bob or for our president.
I think given that there was 2 people listed, he should be able to, because he's one of the, people that put the proposal in, even though he didn't draft the language.
Okay, if that is the case, Josh, give us the specific language you want modified and where. If you need to take a moment, please do. Then we will consider the friendly amendment.
So I want the language to read that it's not U of A or I gotta pull that thing up again.
It doesn't refer
Not
to
a
the
university.
university. It's
Yeah, I
specific
don't want it to be,
institutions.
yeah, I don't want it to be the university institution only, like for any of those. I'm trying to read the spot where it says specifically that, and I want it to be, it should be, if it gets passed, it should be that any program that has a college within the 25-mile radius of their program can have that athlete, that international athlete waived. Or have a second one. I think that's the way it's written.
I'm just reading it and trying to figure out what we would look, because the very first sentence, University Wheelchair Rugby Program is one that has an official club. So this is no longer referring to university official wheelchair rugby programs. Because that's the language of the first sentence.
Yeah, no longer referring to a university wheelchair rugby program, and so that takes it away from U of M and U of A, and makes it so, like, for example, if a team was going to Arizona State University, Phoenix could take advantage of it, or University of Alabama, Lakeshore could take advantage of it, for example.
So the whole first paragraph's gone then, correct?
Yes. But I think it's important that virtual education does not count. They have to live locally for that time period for those 2 semesters and everything. So.
Okay, I'm looking at the proposal and trying to figure out how we tweak it, but in the meantime, Justin.
Yeah, I'm not a fan at all of carve out rules for organizations. I mean, if you're gonna change it and allow, I mean, because we all know, I mean, the spirit of the rule a lot of times is well intended, but we all know as soon as you pass something, everybody's gonna be looking for loopholes, and they will be found and utilized. And then the next thing you know, you'll have a handful of teams taking advantage with 2 internationals. And so I think you either make it cut and dry. Either are we going to expand internationals and have 2 per team, or do we keep it the same in our entire league? And I'm a favor of keeping it same for everybody.
Good.
Would the authors of the proposal be willing to specify that the student must be a full-time student as determined by the institution's rules?
That's already in the definition of an international student athlete that was in the proposal, that it's a full-time student.
Yeah, it does say that in that bullet. It's 12 units. 12 units per semester for undergraduates, 9 for graduate students.
But is
So
12 units the standard, or is that
it's-
set by the university?
12 units is a standard for a semester institution, not for a quarter institution. It's actually significantly more for your quarters. Like for a quarter institution, I think it's less units, but I don't know what that magic number is because I've never worked at a quarter institution. But for 85% of universities, 12 is the standard. Josh, is your hand back up, or is it just not lower it?
I just didn't lower it. Let me do that.
Got it. Dave.
I'd also like to throw out a friendly amendment that the athlete, assuming this passes, I'm against it, but if it passes, that the athlete prove that they are still a full-time student after the withdrawal period, so they can't register and back out without paying anything. Because we know that that could happen as well. Certainly.
I accept that
similar things have been.
amendment.
Thank you.
Ed.
Go ahead. I think this proposal is ripe for abuse. We're going to have imports coming and taking a full load of basket weaving and Spanish immersion, and just as Justin was saying, people are going to find loopholes, and people who have no interest in actually completing their education at the U of A or University of Michigan or University of Wisconsin are going to say, well, I'm registered for 12 credits and it's not your business to look at how rigorous it is. And I'm here to be a full-time student. And if I can play rugby on the side, we all know full well that they're going to be, the reason they're here is so they can serve as another import player and kind of get around the general rules restricting teams to one international player. I just think it's ripe for abuse and there's really no need for it.
Additional comments? We have a motion to vote online. Do we have a second?
Second.
Let's vote.
Fifteen seconds. Five. Closed. This proposal did not pass.
We are done with proposals. Time to hand it back over to our president. There, Noah or Bob?
No, I just wanted, the only thing I was gonna mention as part of, when we talked about fees earlier and when we passed something last year. So based on the proposals that were passed earlier and the proposals from last year, we're changing some fees. The postseason fee, last year we raised to $450 for the going forward, starting with the Low Point Nationals will be teams, hosts can charge $500. The registration fee for the season beginning in the fall, instead of $450 plus the classification fee, will go up from $450 to $550 for regular teams and from $350 to $450 for developmental teams. The late fee will increase from $100 to $200, and the international player fee will increase from $750 to $850. Thank you.
No, thank you. I was actually opening the floor to you earlier and didn't realize I was on mute. So I don't know if there's anything else that anybody has to say before we close this. If not, I'll give it a second if anybody wants to say anything.
Hey, Noah, I have a question for you.
Yep.
Just after what I was able to learn today, my question would it be fair to ask to see if there's an independent committee that we could set up for review to see if there's a conflict of interest with the position of the executive director in regards to holding other jobs at the same time? And here's what I'm saying is like we're paying 80 grand for somebody to hold this position, and I think that should be their position. I don't know if I'm wrong in that, but I think you said that you were, not you, but one of the board members said that they were going to set up some type of review, and I really think that needs to be considered if that's something that the executive director positions, whomever holds it, doesn't have any conflicts of interest.
I appreciate your comment and concern there. We are going to set up a review process, and we actually have already started working on that.
Thank you.
Well, if there's nothing else, I guess I just want to make one comment real quick. Every year, I feel like a lot of people dread this 4-hour window, because it's all day on a Saturday. But at the same time, I feel like this has been pretty awesome to see everybody so invested in the discussions on the topics and submitting proposals and to see how many proposals there were. I mean, this really is the core of how we move everything forward. So I guess I'll just end it by saying thank you to everybody for caring enough to make this a successful meeting.
Could I add something, please? If possible. I
Yes.
know last year we had that tournament meeting that Mike set up. I felt like that was very beneficial. When would that meeting be held again?
Thank you for bringing it up. It's something we talked about, maybe setting a date while everyone was on the phone, and we forgot about it until you just said something.
This is Dan, the secretary, so that'll be my responsibility. I was planning on early August. I don't want to actually set a date, but I will say early August. So probably first to second week of August, I think would be ideal to do that.
And we'll send something out to everybody well in advance to let them know.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Thank you all. Well, if there's nothing else, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and thank you all for being a part of this. I feel like it was a big success.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.